Good evening, Trustee Williams.
Hi. I got back from North Carolina. I'm here.
We're glad you're here.
Welcome back.
How humid was it there?
Oh God, it was awful.
Awful.
This event is Woodstock meets extremely liberal religion.
Oh,
And it's about 3,000 people in the middle of the incredibly hot and humid woods of North Carolina. And I usually keynote for it every year. It pays like a fifth of what I usually get paid, but it is so much fun. It's just,
I bet your hair was very curly there.
oh my goodness. It was pretty bad. Somebody posted a bunch of pictures on Facebook today, and it's just like, oi, 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 oi.
Well, I think we have everybody we're going to have for the time being. Trustee Ellison isn't going to make this workshop, and Trustee Delman is going to be late. And as we know, Trustee Dati is currently enjoying herself in France. So I think we should go ahead and get started, if that's okay with everyone. And Aaron, I'll let you continue your Water 101.
Right. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I thought I would try to focus on what I thought were some of the priority things to understand with the water rights, in particular, working with these Colorado Big Thompson water shares. And now we also have the Lake McIntosh. I can share my screen for some parts of it. But again, as you saw the whole presentation, I don't need to share it just for the wording. But just to get started in the presentation, I began by trying to give a count of how many of the Colorado Big Thompson shares we have. And if everyone was able to see that tally that shows what we had, I can go ahead and pull that up again. It starts with how the town had the 200 shares back in 1941. I think it was. Yep. Right. And it shows different annexations, different subdivisions that brought in some shares. What I wanted to try to show with this is that it really doesn't go one for one. You know, they started to become one for one, but in the beginning with 250 shares in 1941, I believe even at that time, there were probably more than 250 homes in Lyons. So that was one that you can see where these come in. And again, we haven't had very many recently. The last two to come in were in 2019. And I think I mentioned it once before, but it would help to probably mention it again, is that just because we receive one of these shares does not mean in that same year it's dedicated to Longmont. We receive the share before they begin construction. In some cases, they may get everything ready to go. And as we've seen in the case of Red Lions, that's the new dispensary going up on Ute Highway. And they're only just now, they just got started. So they're just connected to the system this year. So it's 3 years later when we're truly dedicating that share. Actually, I think we might have gotten that in before, I believe it was October. I'll have to double check the specifics, but in any event, you can see that it took a little bit of time. So we do want to be aware of that. At this time, all the shares that are here have now been dedicated. Well, let's not go. I was going to look at the Markel shares. We were waiting a number of years until the last one of those last 13 were dedicated, but those now too have all the homes have been built and so dedicated. I then went on to try to go into some of the service connections. I would stop the share just so I can see. Feel free to speak up if there are any questions or try to raise your hand. I'll try to look back and forth as we go along. But I went on just to give you guys the water letter that comes from Longmont. There is initially a water letter that the town writes that I've put together the last few years, and we send that to Longmont. We can go over that also at some point, but again, trying to judge how much to really go through. And so wanted to start with the letter from Longmont because it has quite a bit in it in and of itself. And in particular, it shows how we, where our service connections come from. But I began that next paragraph pointing out how of the 727 CBT units that we have to dedicate 707.8. If you saw, I get into how we get these odd numbers and fractions later on, but suffice it to say it's 707.8 units that we are currently dedicating to Longmont, along with the 1.4 share of Lake McIntosh Reservoir Company. And in that letter from Longmont, it shows that we have 934.8 service connections. Again, I was trying to show a breakdown of where those came from. So if I pull that up again, my computer doesn't always share as quickly. Oh, there we go. Where those come in. That table further down. And the table's not all that straightforward. I was a little confused. It looks like in the beginning, they were not requiring us to pay for all our shares initially. So that's why there is in the beginning, I think we had overpaid some and then it went back down. We were underpaid. That's what the balance is that shows here. But starting in 2012, we've kept it pretty consistent where the number of connections are made, they're paid for that year, we stay evened up. And you can see in 2003, there were 706 connections. Again, as I had mentioned once before, in 2003, we dedicated 500 of the shares we had to Longmont. So again, it wasn't one for one. It wasn't each service connection needed a share dedicated to them. They just decided how much water they felt the town needed to have dedicated and said, okay, dedicate the 500. We were able to keep 98 of our shares not dedicated to Longmont. And as new connections came along, they were dedicated to Longmont. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky in that we have to differentiate between the two different types of shares or the two different types of, not shares, but the two different types of connection that can be made. Just going back to what I had been reading to make sure I'm following along, right? So I guess before we get into those two types of connections, just to point out the math, we have 727 CBT units. We dedicated 707.8. That leaves us 19.2 units of CBT that the town holds, but we do not dedicate each year to Longmont. They're not sort of set aside for anything specific. Along with that, we have the 8 shares of Lake McIntosh Reservoir Company, and we're now dedicating 1.4 shares of that. And that was with regards to the Spirit Hound distillery increase in size that had been talked about at the last meeting. So as new connections are made to the town water service, it's important to understand if these services are what would be considered a pre-existing commitment. That is, were they a property that was in town in 2003 that was considered to be a buildable lot? They were not already connected to the water system, but they might connect to the water system at some point in the future. So in that original 2003 agreement, we dedicated 500 of our CBT shares for all the known connections. Longmont said, okay, you have 98 additional CBT shares. As new services come on, you have that pool that you can use to dedicate to Longmont. In our agreement with Longmont, they said, that's fine. You don't need to do anything different for those pre-existing commitments. They joined the service. They joined the water service. We dedicate a share to Longmont. But then you have new properties that came into town, annexations, subdivisions. those would not have been known about in 2003. And those properties then are not pre-existing. And so the requirement Longmont put in that agreement was any property not considered a pre-existing commitment, you need to require them to bring a CBT share to the town, and you can then turn around and dedicate that CBT share to Longmont. That was agreed upon between Lyons and Longmont. It would make sure that we're always getting new water rights as new service connections come along. And then there wouldn't be the concern of running out of the water rights based on annexations, based on growth of the town. Switch back to look at you guys. Any questions on that portion so far, going over some of that? Just keep going.
Trustee, I think.
Yeah, so Aaron, you were saying, the decision we made with Spirit Hounds is we took cash in lieu of them finding a share. But since that's a new connection, we had to pass over a share to Longmont, is what you're saying, right?
Correct. Well, either way, we'd have to pass over a share to Longmont.
Either way.
Again, yes,
Okay.
whether they were pre-existing or whether they were a new service. The difference between the two is that for a pre-existing, the town does not have to require them to dedicate a share to us. So again, as I mentioned in the, that document, there are 4 properties we are aware of in town that currently are buildable lots. They were in town in 2003. They're what we consider pre-existing.
Okay, but Spirit Hounds was not considered that. So
No.
we had, to be clear, we had to turn over a share.
Yes, and they were required to dedicate something to us, is the critical difference.
All right, so we went down from 8 Lake Macintosh units down to 7, pretty much.
6.6.
6.6.
Right.
Okay, so we went down to 6.6. So we still have 6.6 left in the bank, basically.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, that was my question. Thanks.
Okay. Sure. So again, of the 19.2 units of CBT we have available, we probably want to look at it that these 4 pre-existing commitments will not be bringing in new shares. Therefore, we will be if they do build and connect to the water service, we'll be dedicating one of those 19.2 units of CBT, and our extra bank, as you might call it, would decrease by that 4. So we'd be down to 15.2 units.
Trustee Williams.
But it looks to me like we're not positive that it's 4. Is that true, Victoria? As I was looking through all the info, it looked like we just don't have any assurance that it's in fact 4.
The 4.
Is
The
that
pre-existing, and we just spent some time trying to verify that, but I've now come across another one that I have questions on. There are some specific definitions in that agreement with Longmont to determine whether or not you classify it as a pre-existing commitment. In this case, if it did not have access to it, would that mean it was not considered buildable at the time because there was no access to it? Again, we get into ones where you could have someone with their attorney trying to determine that. But yes, I also put in my letter that we want to be prepared that there could be some others that come into existence.
Yeah. Are you interested in knowing where those are? Is that what you're? So one of them is on Upper 5th. There is a lot that is landlocked with no access. But it's a formal lot, and we're not really quite sure how that one is to be handled. If you're familiar with the Waz House on 3rd and High.
No, that's already connected to.
Oh, that one's connected. Oh, they have a separate lot as well that could be, but he's saying that's accounted for. Where are the other ones, Aaron?
The 2 are on Overlook. There are 2 lots on Overlook that, if it's truly buildable or not, has always been questionable. Steve McCain's property does not have a water service connection, 431 4th.
Right next to us, he doesn't, have a water line.
And so it's in town and would be one. And then there is one of the lots that's out 40, 70 something. It's at the corner of Stone Canyon and Ute Highway. Those
Like
are the
you pump
four
it?
we know of. Yes, across the street, right
Across,
across Stone Canyon. Former Mayor Angelo's.
Yeah, right.
He has additional buildable lot on there that's not. He has three.
there's
And
3 lots.
two of them have been already in the system and one is not.
I wonder if for documentation's sake, Aaron, we should just list those on your memo just for filing reasons. So someday in the future,
Okay.
Can
And
remember those.
we did do those letters to put in their actual
we did,
file
that's true. Yep.
stating they had been done. Let me get back over to that. And then, there are some other lots that people may be aware of, the 8 lots that I think have been discussed over off of the new Carter Drive and McConnell that are not part of the Summit subdivision. There is also an additional parcel right at the corner of McConnell and the creek, that triangle parcel. Again, but all the parcels in the Lions Valley Park were done under subdivision improvement agreement. And in that agreement, there's specific stipulation that CBT shares would be required. And of course, that's the board always has the right to make changes or waive it, but at this point, they're covered unless some change was done. So then I wanted to go on in the discussion just to go over some of those concerns. As I said, if we take those 4 out, we're down to 15.2 in what we might consider our reserves. We do want to have some additional shares for unknowns, such as finding another couple of properties. There is also the thought that when the town connects, we do need to have a service connect. We do need to consider that a service connection and have water rights. Now, I can go into it if we have time, but there is some service connections that were adjusted because of the flood. They're called the FDP. If you saw in the letter with Longmont, that's a slightly side topic that we can get into at another point, but we've been able to use some of those for our service connections. And at this point, we don't foresee any, but we also don't know what we don't know. And then the last one would be that could be situations where the trustees decided on an individual case that you wanted to accept cash in lieu of water rights, something that was just done with the Spirit Hounds decision and Lake McIntosh. Just switching over to check questions. Okay. So on that topic, I went on to, mention how the 6.6 shares of Lake McIntosh that have not been dedicated to Longmont. We hold the 8 shares in our portfolio. We've dedicated 1.4 shares for Spirit Hounds. And in that case, it was decided just at the last meeting to accept the cash, the 26,000, instead of accepting additional water rights. So that was to try to show you how we can have a pool of shares. And if we don't get more water rights, we take from our pool and dedicate. Now, the staff is to be looking to get 1 additional share. So hopefully that will bring it back up to 7.6. We would have 4/10 of a share less. It may be something to think about the fact that Longmont advised it should be 1.4 shares of Lake McIntosh based on the volume of water that we talked about before. How much water can we truly get? I had almost a 2-hour meeting with Longmont's top water people on Friday and went over a number of other things that I haven't had time to get into this. But on that, they assured me it was based on the volume of water. But in that situation, we found out that somebody needs to bring 2 shares to the town because you can't get a partial share. So really the town is getting additional shares to put into our bank in addition to what we have to dedicate. If we get 2 shares, we get 6/10 of a share of Lake McIntosh that can help build up the bank. Again, the bank can be used for projects that the trustees feel are worth having a dedication for subsidizing housing, or however you wanted to look at that. Just trying to check in on any questions.
Trustee Edding has a question.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I have two questions actually at this point. If we go out into the Eastern Corridor, we need to have effectively a bank of shares ready to go, right? Because whatever would be built out is going to require shares to Longmont. My question is CMEX holding a lot of shares themselves? And how can we repurpose those shares if we can get them from CMEX when we build out the Eastern Corridor?
Yeah, I don't know that we can get them. First, it's just to emphasize that while we need to have shares that are given to Longmont, at this point, everyone who annexes in is required to bring those shares to the town to give to Longmont.
Yeah.
Unless you decide.
I want to make sure that they've got somewhere to buy them from. And if we go into the CMEX negotiations, one of the things we might want to pay attention to is first right of refusal to their water rights.
So the CBT shares can be purchased right now. It's a matter of how much they cost.
Yeah.
And we have been talking about wondering how many water shares they have. We got an estimate. Victoria, do you remember what it was?
I was told by someone at Boulder County that they have significant water shares, but I have no clue what their portfolio looks like. But I think Boulder County has first right on those water shares already.
Okay, so I think that's something we would have to bring up is how can we wrestle away at least first rights to some of those water shares to basically be a pool for the Eastern Corridor. Okay, my second question to you, Aaron, is when we made the decision for Spirit Hounds, we also talked about the fact that the town would be looking to buy shares periodically when we found them. Is that possible? Can we buy some shares? Did you find anybody that's selling 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 that we could purchase to bank up?
Of Lake McIntosh, not CBT.
Yeah, of Lake McIntosh.
We've put it out there with the broker that we work with, and I've not heard anything yet. So they haven't replied back. But again, that's only been a couple of weeks.
He said, yeah, he just said, I'll find you a share.
Okay, so he was pretty confident?
Yeah, he said, I'll find you a share if you don't have a timeline like those guys did.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's finally closed, but we should be getting the 49 shares of Lake McIntosh from Summit. They're in the negotiation works and just waiting till the certificates are with us. Now, again, we will be turning around we won't be doing it in October. They probably won't have service connections until next year, but then we'll have to dedicate those over to them.
Mayor Pro Tem? You're muted.
Thank you. Aaron, could you repeat that again? So I was kind of wondering, and maybe giving us that real world example of Summit, how that actually works. Could you describe that in a little bit more detail? And that might help me hone in on understanding this a little more.
The process. So we look at it. I don't know if as far as the volume or the amount, we look at it that Summit has 24 single family homes, and then they have the 4 quadplexes, which are 16 multi-units, basically. But in that last paragraph of mine, doing the math on the 16 apartments, I guess I hadn't got to the point where I was mentioning that multi-family units are considered 7/10 of a service connection instead of 1 full service connection. So basically the 4 quadplex units are 7/10 times 4, which is 2.8 service connections for each of the quadplexes, times 4 for the 4 buildings is 11.2 service connections. Plus the 24 buildings they have means they really have what would be considered 35.2 service connections. We then said you can either present us with the CBTs 1 for 1, or you can use Lake McIntosh, in which case we need 1.4 shares for those 35.2 connections. And that math came out to 49 shares of Lake McIntosh Reservoir Company. So they are in the process of getting the 49 shares that they have transferred to the town. So those need to be in the town's possession before building permits are issued. Then we have 49 units in our portfolio. And then once they actually connect to the water service, at the end of that year, we tally up all the connections and we let Longmont know. So we let them know we had 36.2. We let them know we have that total number of service connections, and we are going to dedicate Lake McIntosh at 1.4 shares per service connection. And so we then have to transfer those 49 shares. We have to dedicate them to Longmont. I don't know how important it is, but that is something we do every year. They're still ours, both CBT and Lake McIntosh. We just dedicate them to Longmont so that they can treat water for us for that given year. So if something came up and we decided to go with someone else for water, if that somehow became possible, we would still have all these water rights that we could then work with this other company. I'm not sure.
Trustee Williams, I think you had a question.
So the dedication is purely related to them providing the service. If
Correct.
they're treating the water, that's why they get the debt. That's what all of that is about.
Yes.
Thank you.
I know it's finally all coming together for me after more than 2 years of this. So, okay, any final thoughts, Director Kaplan, before we move on to the second part of our workshop?
The last part was just going over the service connections in a little more, that last couple paragraphs that I had, to point out how when you're looking at service connections, it's really considered to be just what it would be for a 3/4 inch pipe. So if somebody gets a 1 inch pipe, that's considered 2 3/4 inch pipes. Again, it gets to be a little funky with the exponential math. But if someone comes in with a 1.5 inch pipe and they want 1.5 inch service connection, that's considered 4 3/4 inch service connections. So it's not just based on the physical pipe. You know, one pipe is not one service connection, just so when you see some of the numbers in the annual letter. And then the last part was to follow up on that cash in lieu. As I mentioned, we've had developers who are interested and want to know if there's any interest in the Board of Trustees hearing a presentation from them. They've sent their presentation. I've looked over some of it to develop a cash in lieu policy. From my understanding now, and again, I feel pretty comfortable, and then I get into another meeting and I'm like, okay, we have a lot more to go. A cash in lieu program where you're trying to set a specific amount that you can say, this is what we're going to use for the coming future. Maybe you even update it every year, can get to be a little bit complex. You know, Longmont has a number of staff. They have an entire individual water board who weighs in on these things. And so that is definitely a bit of a concern for a cash in lieu program. However, you could do the individual accepting of cash in lieu as was done with Spirit Hounds.
Right.
So if there's interest in that, you can let us know, or I can let the developers know, you know, if they want to do that, they could make a request to the trustees to have that on the board meeting, and you guys can decide if you want that or not.
Thank you. And Aaron, thank you so much for this follow-up. And I think if individual trustees have additional questions, send them along to Aaron, of course, copy Victoria. And we can also schedule an additional workshop on this if we decide that we want to. I want to stay cognizant of time and move on to the next section of our workshop tonight, which is gun violence prevention opportunities. I see Dustin Williamson is joining us. I'll give him a second. So Dustin Williamson is the policy counsel for Everytown for Gun Safety. And he has graciously offered to join us tonight if he can answer any questions that we might have. Of course, we know that this is not Attorney Dittman's area of expertise, although I know he's been working very hard on it for this workshop. So Dustin, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself briefly.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Dustin Williamson. I'm a counsel at Everytown. I mostly work on legislative advocacy, including at the local level. And I helped with some of the ordinances that have recently been passed by other municipalities in the Boulder County area.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And I believe Attorney Dittman has a short presentation.
Yeah, we're going to try to keep it short. There's a lot of information to get through to kind of give you the full perspective of gun control regulation in Colorado and then nationally. But I'm going to try to do my best to give you at least some background information to help analyze some of the proposed ordinances that have been put out, and as well as additional ideas you may have on gun violence prevention. So I'm going to share my screen real quickly on a PowerPoint, and this PowerPoint will be available to the trustees following this meeting. So okay, put the presentation view. Can you all see that?
Yeah, looks good.
Excellent. Yep. Okay. So as I usually do, as you all know, before my presentations, I give usually a syllabus about what we plan to cover. We're going to start off with an introduction to constitutional and Colorado gun rights. As you will see, they're a little bit different. The constitutional provisions and the Colorado State Constitution and also the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. We'll talk about the sample ordinances that have been proposed by Everytown and the Giffords Foundation. And we'll talk about the status of those Boulder County municipalities and the adoption of their ordinances, as well as some other front range municipalities who have adopted ordinances. And then finally, we'll briefly talk about the Town of Superior lawsuit, which was just filed last week. So that's the plan. We're going to start off though with the biggest, meatiest part of the presentation, which is an introduction of the constitutional and Colorado gun rights. So I'm going to start with this slide, which is a brief comparison of the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, which we all know, I think, to some degree, and then also the Colorado Constitution, which is a little bit different, kind of surprisingly, right to bear arms. And so that plays out somewhat, as we'll see in the various case law and the statutes that have been built off of the Colorado Constitution. There's not a lot, and we'll go through pretty quickly. Federally, there's only 3 cases that of any importance. And then, only, 1 piece of legislation in the past 30 years, which is, passed a couple weeks ago. But Colorado has much more significant statutory enactments of gun rights and explicit ability for municipalities to regulate. And that is somewhat derived from, the difference of the constitutional provisions. The Second Amendment is, has been analyzed 3 ways. Sunday, pretty wide open, and the Colorado one is much more specific about specifically defending the home, and then also specifically containing regulation of concealed weapons within its provisions, which is not anywhere present in the Second Amendment. That's something to keep in mind as we kind of look through the different statutory and case law relating to these. So we're going to start with the federal Second Amendment decisions, really pre-2022. I have at the bottom the one that you may be familiar with, the Bruin case. We're going to talk about that later as we kind of get through everything else. But we're going to start with the first 2 cases, which really set the stage, which is the District of Columbia versus Heller case. And up until this point, there really was no recognition of a personal right to bear arms in the Second Amendment. This case changed that, an opinion by Justice Scalia. And what it did is establish the right to own firearms and store them in the home. And the court developed this, kind of balancing test for examining gun control regulations, a 2-part test, really looking at, the reasonability, more or less, of the gun control regulation put forth by the community, or in this case, the federal government, in the Heller case, versus the means used to do that. What was really interesting, to this day about the Heller case is that, it's often painted as kind of a blanket right to bear arms in all situations. But really interestingly, Justice Scalia did recognize, some very explicit gun regulations within that decision. That includes prohibiting firearms by dangerous people, forbidding firearm possession in sensitive places, such as schools and government buildings were called specifically, and imposing conditions on commercial sale of firearms. So it's not a blanket right to bear arms. Some, regulation was permissible under that decision, at least. A few years later, there's the McDonald case, which is basically Heller 2.0. Because the Heller case was about the District of Columbia, really, was only applicable to the federal government on its face because, DC is a district of the United States federal government. The McDonald case basically extends those, restrictions and rights under the Second Amendment to municipalities and other states and counties through the 14th Amendment. Is that the city of Chicago had very similar regulations to the District of Columbia. So this was the analysis we all did, pre-2022, basically a reasonable balancing test on, the regulations and some things being explicitly, permitted, at least under the court's interpretation of the Second Amendment at that time. This changes pretty significantly as of a few weeks ago, depending on how you read it under the Bruin case. And I'm not going to spoil it at this point in time, but just to know that, this is a good framework for thinking about it, but it has changed somewhat with the Bruin case, which we'll talk about at the end of this section. As I mentioned earlier, Colorado has been much more active than the federal government in, passing law and regulating firearms, also restricting the ability explicitly of local governments in some situations to regulate. Starting really in 2000, the state legislature put out a law prohibiting municipalities from regulating firearms within private vehicles. This was later amended to somewhat to make it more explicit that you can carry in a car without a permit, and that long guns has been loaded and packed away, and that there was no right to carry firearms on public transportation. Originally, it was just pretty blanket. Municipalities are prohibited from regulating firearms within private vehicles, and later it was kind of amended to add specificity. Along in 2003, there was a system of concealed carry permits, uniform concealed carry permits established. Previously, there was kind of a messy system of discretionary concealed carry permits issued by sheriffs. The sheriffs didn't really like being, kind of the gatekeeper of concealed carry permits. It changed to a system of basically, if you meet the criteria for a concealed permit, you get one. And because of that kind of what we call a must issue system, there's over approximately 500,000 concealed permits in Colorado. At one point in time, there was the rights granted under the statute in 2003 was used to allow a concealed carry permit in most public places in Colorado. And this includes state-owned and municipal property. For those of you who may remember, famously in 2012, the University of Colorado was allowed to have students concealed carry on campus. Kind of as a fun factoid, one of my law school classmates was one of the plaintiffs in that case and was concealed carrying during my time at law school. So that's kind of a fun fact on that one. In 2013, the state became involved and, starting, kind of before the state was very permissive in gun rights. And in 2013, it kind of flips where the state starts being more restrictive with gun rights. It starts off with a 15-round magazine limitation and that statute that's cited. Also, that same year, there was universal background checks implemented. Previously, only federally registered firearms dealers were required to do background checks. Now in Colorado, it's universal. And so anyone who sells a firearm, even if it's with a friend, you selling or giving a gun to your friend, my understanding is that that transaction also requires background checks now in Colorado. This was challenged by Rocky Mountain gun owners and was upheld. In 2020, Supreme Court case in Colorado. Colorado also kind of, and I sorry for the misspelling, I'll fix that. Kind of adopts this reasonable purpose test, a little bit different than the McDonald test, but still asking basically the same basic question: is the restriction that's being put out there reasonable fit with the purpose? Is the means fit the purpose? So is the regulation reasonable, more or less? And then in 2019, we have the red flag law, which is a very hot topic currently, given the new federal legislation. It basically allows either police agencies or individuals to petition a court to take away firearms from an individual who may be a danger to themselves or others. There's some interesting data on this that, if a police agency applies for it, it's granted pretty freely, but if an individual applies for it, much less likely to be granted. But it is a tool that exists, at least under Colorado state statute, for gun violence prevention. Continuing on with the statutes in Colorado, so we have a lot of them. Back in the day of Colorado gun rights being very expansive, there was this law that is very important and kind of what we're doing here. It later gets changed, but it basically declares the entire field of firearms regulation a matter of statewide concern. If you may remember back to your legal training when we first started on your board term, there's this issue of the powers of municipalities versus the state, especially for a home rule municipality. And if the state has decided that an area is a matter of statewide concern, it basically does not allow municipalities to do anything that would be in conflict with the state regulatory scheme. And so by declaring that's a matter of statewide concern, it basically preempts or does not allow municipalities to further regulate. And so the SB 0325 create a whole bunch of restrictions on local governments, from creating new legislation for firearms specifically. It basically reinforces expand on those rights, but to carry in private vehicles, prohibited from maintaining records of person who purchase or transfer, prohibited regulation of types of firearms. So like assault weapons kind of bans were prohibited under this piece of legislation. But it did allow municipalities to regulate open carry of firearms, but only in a building or specific area where signs are posted. And so pretty narrow ability to regulate open carry under this piece of legislation. Denver already had a number of these types of regulations on its books. It's 17 different gun regulations on the books. And so Denver, challenged the legislation pretty quickly. And it was kind of a mixed bag for Denver in terms of winning some and losing some. I don't have the list in front of me, but there were some things like carrying in an airport, that was upheld, but other things like open carrying in parks, at least under this piece of legislation, was struck down at that time. Boulder enacted regulations in 2018, and it was defeated under the same statute. So that's all 2018, 2003 to 2018. Very hard for municipalities to regulate firearms. That changes, which is why we're able to do kind of what we're doing tonight, to consider regulations in 2021. And so the state legislature, partially in response to the 2018 Boulder decision, it creates a partial relief mechanism through SB 21 from that 2003 piece of legislation. So the important thing for us specifically is that it substantially modifies the original legislative declaration by saying that firearms regulation matter of mixed concern, allowing municipalities to participate in this type of lawmaking. If it's a matter of statewide concern, then arguably there's no room for municipalities to regulate. So there is the ability to regulate firearms now, at least to some degree under state law. We can regulate components of firearms unless it's prohibited by another statute. We can prohibit concealed carry permit holders from bringing handguns into a building or specific area where a prohibition is posted. This reverses that CU case. It basically gives us a lot more power where previously none existed under the 2003 law. The limitations, there's still limitations in this law. We're still preempted where another state law expressly precludes local regulation. Think back to that firearms transportation piece of legislation, which is very specific that we can't regulate that. Concealed carry permits can only be subject to a civil penalty. and requirement to leave the premises if they violate a posted prohibition. So if we post a prohibition on a city park or a town park that says, no open carry allowed, we can't criminally charge them for that. And that criminal penalties generally of violating local firearms ordinances can only be imposed on a person who knew or reasonably should have known that the conduct was prohibited. And this is quite different from most criminal prosecutions. When you take criminal law in law school, you learn very quickly that ignorance of the law is not a defense. Well, at least in the case of firearms regulation in Colorado, it is. If you didn't know that you're breaking the law or didn't knowingly, try to break the law, you're not allowed to be criminally charged in Colorado. So now we're into the Bruin case I mentioned earlier. Under the previous understanding of Second Amendment rights in Colorado and nationally, in fact, is this reasonable test, whether it be under the McDonald test or under the Colorado reasonable means test. It more or less came down to was the restrictions that are being proposed reasonable in light of the aims they were seeking to achieve. The Bruin case changes that. At least the standard is believed to change the standard on that one, at least federally. The facts of this case are somewhat interesting. There's a New York state law requiring anyone to carry a concealed weapon to show proper cause in order to get a license. And that went beyond just saying a general need for self-defense. You had a very specific, kind of reason, is at least what the court's ruling said for obtaining that license. They didn't go into a lot on how it was actually applied. The holding of the case, what the court ruled was that the New York law was unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. It rejects that two-part balancing test under the McDonald cases and the Heller cases, and instead creates this new test where courts should only uphold gun restrictions if there's a tradition of such regulation in U.S. history. Now, what does that mean? And that's the part that's very unclear. What sort of gun regulations are traditional in U.S. history. We can look to the concurrence and the majority opinion to get some idea. At least the majority opinion speaks to carrying in sensitive places, but also has kind of a disclaimer that not every place can be sensitive, that there's only certain places that are sensitive, but failing to really name what those are. The concurring opinion, which is basically, I agree with the majority opinion. Here's how I kind of, understand the majority opinion to be, in a simple way of putting it, says that they believe that at least restrictions on the condition of sale, licensing, and objective-based regulation, would be permissible under the new standard and under the traditional historical tradition standard that's been developed more or less. And other than that, this case is so new, we don't really know, how it'll be applied to local regulation. But it's something to keep in mind as we think about, the legal standard when what may be permissible, what may not be permissible. Finally, as we get through kind of the legal portion of this, at least want to mention the new Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was signed into law a few weeks ago. As I mentioned earlier, it's the first piece of gun regulation at the federal level since the mid 1990s, that assault weapon ban, which was, eventually, went away. It was sunsetted. What this law does is expands background checks for those under 21 federally. It puts out $750 million for helping manage red flag laws like those that exist in Colorado. And it closes loopholes for gun sales for boyfriends and straw purchasers. The boyfriends is for domestic violence, people convicted of domestic violence. Before, you could have a partner purchase a gun for you, like a married partner. This extends now to people you're in a close relationship with, not just, marriage. Straw purchases are people you have a friend go buy a gun for you and then transfer it to you. And those, that transfer between your friend and you doesn't require a background check. And now that would be eliminated, is my understanding, under the federal law. There's expanded licensing requirements for federal firearms dealers. I don't know all the specifics on that, but that's at least the summaries I've read that includes that, and also funding for school mental health and security within this piece of legislation. So that was just signed into law not too long ago. So that's kind of, the background, at least the current legal state as I understand it, on federal gun control regulation. And I wanted to go into, some of the sample ordinances that every town and the Giffords Foundation sent to the town and other Boulder County communities, and then we'll get into what people have actually done. And this one, if staff wants to jump in, or Dustin, you want to jump in, you certainly can. And so my read of the model ordinance is that there's 8 more or less different policies that could be separate or one ordinance together, but really they're kind of an a la carte menu of different ideas. The first one is prohibiting open carry, the ability to open carry in public within the town of Lyons. This would not apply to places, like a restaurant, which specifically allowed it, or within your own home, but within a public place, prohibiting open carry. The next one would be prohibiting carry, whether concealed or open, in sensitive areas like schools, courtrooms, hospitals, those sorts of things. It actually lists in the policy what it considers to be a sensitive area. We have some of those in Lyons. We don't have some of those in Lyons, so it would have to be modified. The next one would be raising the age from 18 to 21 for purchasing a firearm. There's one on, extending the waiting period for a firearm. I think it's 14 days, but I can't exactly recall. But of course, that'd be at the discretion of the town board about what the waiting period should be if that was one you'd want to adopt. There's also a number of restrictions on the type of firearm, including bans on assault weapons, large capacity magazines. I mentioned there's already a 15 round limit under Colorado state law, but I think Boulder adopted 10. Trigger activators, which are basically, I believe, turn some automatic weapons into automatic weapons, more or less. There's restrictions on firearms dealers, ammunition sellers, about whether not allowing any more of those, like Greenwood Village has done, or potentially there's be other options as well. Putting up signs, as Boulder has done, I believe, saying that firearms are dangerous. Other firearm dealer signage saying that I'm a federal firearms dealer. You can be a federal firearms dealer in a residential area potentially, and so at least under existing town law. So if you were to be on, you put a sign notifying the public more or less that you were a federally registered firearms dealer. And then bans on ghost guns. And my understanding, again, not the expert on this, is that a ghost gun is basically a receiver body, a partial gun that you then complete as the owner of that partial gun, and then it's more or less untraceable. If it wasn't sold through a dealer, is my understanding of what that is. And if I've said anything wrong, or if you want to have additional detail on those, you've all received these as of last week to take a look at as well. But those are some of the ideas there, at least in the Everytown and Giffords Law Center package. There's other ideas too that may be out there. One that we have internally as a staff talked about is using our very expansive zoning powers to prevent gun sales in certain zoning districts. For example, saying, creating a prohibited use for firearms dealer in the commercial downtown district, or, creating restrictions on sales near schools. Traditionally things that are local police powers are given a much more, are viewed a more favorable light by the courts. We're looking at whether or not it's preempted or constitutional. I mean, there's a long-standing tradition, that's a new case we're going to use of using zoning powers to, zone out certain uses. That's an idea that we had as staff, as maybe another option in addition to those 8 that are provided, is using our traditional zoning powers to prevent in certain areas. And there could be a whole host of other ideas that you may have. I mean, that's part of the beauty of public policy creation, is that you may have additional ideas in addition to the ones that are provided and the one that staff has thought of, that the town may do in order to respond to this crisis. I want to go briefly through the status of the Boulder County municipalities and their adoption of ordinances, and as well as those that are non-Boulder County. But I think most of the news coverage has been on the Boulder County municipalities. Most of the ones that you've probably heard about are the ones that were done in June on the day of action, and that is Lafayette. You did it in June. They did signs for federal firearms dealers, a ghost gun ban, a prohibition of open carry in public places, and a prohibition of concealed carry in sensitive places. Boulder and Louisville did kind of identical enactments, or went a little beyond Lafayette, banning assault weapons, high capacity magazines, trigger activators, and raising the age, prohibiting firearms in certain public places, regulating the purchase and possession of ghost guns, prohibiting open carry of firearms in public places, requiring all firearms dealers to post signs where transfers take place, and then add a new definition city code for deadly weapons, I think, and requiring a waiting period prior to the sale of firearms. And then Superior kind of went all in and did all 8 of the Everytown Giffords ordinances as a variety of other restrictions. So on the scale of most expansive to least expansive, Superior, from my understanding, has the most expansive kind of legislative enactment of gun control regulations. In addition to the Boulder County municipalities, a number of non-Boulder County municipalities have taken action. Greenwood Village prevents new federal firearms dealers within the city of Greenwood Village or the town of Greenwood Village. That's getting a lot of press coverage recently. There's only currently one person that has one, and it wouldn't apply to him. It will only prevent new ones, not existing ones. Edgewater got almost surprisingly a lot of flack publicly for trying to do what the rest of the Boulder County municipalities did. And they ended up going from, I think, 7 ordinances down to just 1, which is the ban of open carry in the city. Denver has a long history of gun regulations. They already prohibit a lot of open carry, but they've also, in May 2022, added the ban of concealed carry in Denver city parks. A number of other municipalities are considering action. Broomfield and Longmont publicly are the ones that are next in line, but I probably have spoken to additional 5 or 6 city attorneys and town attorneys, which are considering something, whether it be all 8 or a subset of that, or their own ideas for gun violence prevention regulations. And I just briefly want to introduce the Town of Superior lawsuit. So I mentioned earlier, Town of Superior had probably the most expansive gun violence prevention ordinance. It was 21 pages long. Includes all sorts of different things, including all 8 of the kind of policy ideas in the package you were given. And on July 7th, the Rocky Mountain Gunners, the National Association for Gun Rights, and an individual who lives in Superior filed suit against Superior and Sheriff Joe Pelly in federal court. The reason why they filed against Sheriff Joe Pelly is he's the one responsible for enforcing the regulations in Superior. It's like Lions, they have an IGA at Boulder County for enforcing the regulations. They allege that the ordinance violates the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, of course, and they really lean heavily on that new Bruin case, kind of given the more restricted view in which the court believes local governments can regulate this. It also asks for a preliminary injunction against the enforcement of the ordinance while the case is being decided, basically arguing that Superior gun owners shouldn't be subject to this while the case is under review by the courts. And of course, Superior is represented by CIRSA. CIRSA has assigned attorneys to represent the town in their lawsuit. I have been asked, why Superior, and no one can exactly answer that question, but it's likely probably one of 2 reasons. One, in order to have standing, you really need someone who's directly injured by this, and they just happen to have a member that lives in Superior. It sounds like, they may have had standing otherwise, but several gun rights lawsuits have been struck down for lack of standing. So probably to cover their bases, they wanted someone who actually lived in the municipality. Second, as I mentioned, my understanding is that the Superior ordinance is probably the most expansive of all the ones that have been passed to date. And so the thought probably is that if they would succeed in striking down Superior's ordinance, that they could copycat that with everybody else, as everybody else has at least some portion of the Superior lawsuit, the Superior ordinance is part of theirs. And so very early, as you're all aware through the town's own litigation, these things take a while to spin up. But just want to let you know that Superior has been filed with a lawsuit because of their ordinance. And so that's a very broad kind of view of what's to come, and what the legal landscape is, and what has been provided to us as options. But really, this time is for the Board of Trustees to decide what it believes ideas could be, and for staff to answer questions to the extent we can on what we think is feasible in Lions. And so that's more or less my presentation. It's meant to be kind of a primer, but I'll be happy to send that out after today for future reference.
Thank you so much. Excellent work on that. I know it was a big lift and I really, really appreciate it. I'd like to ask first if Attorney Williams has anything he'd like to add.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, all of these model ordinances were drafted and passed on to you all prior to Bruin coming down. It's our belief that the ordinances in the packet are still a good law. Bruin as of now deals with some pretty strict concealed carrying standards in a handful of states. And New York has since changed their law and has expanded sensitive area restrictions in light of Bruin, because they didn't really have those because their permitting standard was strict. So that's sort of the overview. There have also been a couple of other sort of interesting developments since this was drafted, including that the ATF promulgated a rule, I think back in April, saying that ghost guns or some ghost gun kits are now considered firearms under federal law, meaning that they have to get a background check when they're sold by dealers. It creates a sort of interesting loophole in Colorado law where Colorado requires most handgun transfers to go through a dealer, but since Colorado doesn't have a definition that may include ghost guns, like those firearms may not be covered. So that's another issue. It's another thing that has happened since. And I guess the other thing I would say, I think Superior and the other none of the municipalities have yet passed the dealer licensing part of this, which is like a pretty big regulatory scheme, and that I could see why a municipality wouldn't want to take on that responsibility at this time.
Thank you so much. Also on this call, Sergeant Christ, is that you on the iPhone there?
Yes, it is.
It is. Hey, thanks
It
for
is.
joining us.
Absolutely.
So we invited Sergeant Chris to answer any questions about enforcement, and Administrator Simonson and Attorney Dittman and I sat down with him a number of weeks ago now to discuss particularly the open carry ban and whether law enforcement would be in support of that. Because I think that no matter what we decide as a board, it's extremely important that our law enforcement feels comfortable enforcing whatever it is we decide. So with that, thank you for joining us. I'll open it up for questions to either of the attorneys or Sergeant Chris. Trustee Edding.
Yeah, my first question, Attorney Dittman, do you think that one group went after Superior because Superior was probably the least capable financially of defending their position? And are they going after small towns just because they have less money for lawyers?
I don't think so, because as I mentioned earlier, that SURSA is covering them for this, and so pretty much all of us municipalities, with the exception of Aurora and Denver and Colorado Springs, are part of SURSA. So we already covered from an insurance perspective,
Okay.
and so I don't think that's the reason. I mean, if that was the theory, I think they'd probably go after Edgewater, right? But Edgewater's ordinance was a lot less expansive than Superior's, and so I think from a judicial kind of efficiency perspective, since Superior's was the broadest, it probably made the most sense to go after them.
Okay, so you don't think we're running any risk just simply being a small community and we're easy to pick on?
I can't say what the risk is. I mean, it could be a risk, but if we were to be sued, of course, we would be representing the town as well as SURSA. We probably file a claim to SURSA as well.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Hi, thank you. I just want to follow up, and I'm curious. Attorney Williamson, every town, I'm under the impression that they are also offering pro bono opportunities for some, like a community. I'm also concerned financially of the risk, and yet I personally support every single one of these. But the idea of our small town being sued right now is really, it feels very burdensome, and I'm quite concerned about that. So I wanted to pose that question to you about pro bono, and then I have another follow-up question with Sergeant Christ.
Yeah, so I don't actually work on the litigation team. That's a separate team, but it is my understanding that they are strongly behind what municipalities in Colorado are doing, and have reached out to Superior. I mean, I don't know that they have, the Superior's representation might be sufficient, but I think they are offering to help put people in contact with other law firms that are doing pro bono in this area, and have done that in other states where municipalities have passed ordinances that were later challenged.
Okay, thank you. And then Sergeant Chris, I was curious from your standpoint in terms of enforcement, but also what is the trend happening in Boulder County right now in terms of what you feel you can support for Lions versus other communities within Boulder County? I'm curious why perhaps just the open carry right now is the one that you feel the strongest about.
Okay. Well, I feel the strongest about open carry because it garners the most attention, and that's what I'll get called on probably 99% of the time because it becomes visible. It makes people uncomfortable and they're willing to call the police at that point. A lot of the gun laws, which I'm with you, I support pretty much everything that you guys are all talking about. However, as Attorney Dittman stated that, a lot of this under the gun laws of Colorado, the perpetrator's got to knowingly be breaking the law. He's got to understand that he is breaking the law. And for me to enforce a lot of this, it doesn't even come to my attention until usually after the fact. Usually there's a crime. Then it comes to our attention, which the gun law doesn't help us in that aspect because of the Second Amendment. I can't go into somebody's home and make sure they're purchasing guns properly. So those are the issues there. And again, the open carry is what draws attention for most people. It would by far be the easiest to enforce if people know that this is not an open carry town. It's posted. At least I have ground to stand on to confront someone and say, hey, you cannot open carry. And therefore they become knowledgeable of the law and they continue to do so. I can do something about it. As far as the trends in Boulder County, this topic has been hot. It's been weighing on my mind a lot. I spent the last week at the Nazareth School conference in Denver. Gun violence is a hot topic there. I'm trying to figure out what's the problem that we're trying to solve in Lyons specifically. And I guess across Boulder County as well. We don't have a huge gun violence problem, but there is gun violence out there. So it's not, it's not running rampant. People aren't, at least in Boulder County, just gunning people down. Can it happen? Sure. All of that, but it feels like a good thing to do, but it also feels like a little bit, to be very candid, just kind of oh my God, there's more gun violence across the nation. We've got to stop this somehow, and putting the laws in effect. Not to say that they won't work or don't work, but I don't see a major problem at this point, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Sergeant Chris. And I'm glad you said that because that brings up a point that I'd like to make, which is one of the reasons that all of the municipalities sort of marched together in this was to also send a signal to our state legislature, our state representatives, that this is what our communities want in the state. Mm-hmm. And so it's a pressure for those folks to act at the state level. I'll also tell you, I had a great conversation with District Attorney Michael Doherty, who indicated that he is 100% behind the town of Lyons enacting legislation and that he's happy to participate however he can.
Great.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Trustee Williams.
So just to be absolutely clear, it's the open carry that would be by far the easiest to enforce?
I believe so, yeah.
And there would not be a second to that. It would be pretty much that's the one.
Yeah, other than a gun law that comes into that the town wants to adopt, that's very how should I say, municipal ordinance on, we're not going to allow somebody to come in and sell guns, and someone tries to open up shop. Things like that become very written. That's easy one, because they're gonna have to go through a permitting process of some sort. But for the lay person that these gun laws kind of pertain to, the open carry, I believe is by far the easiest one to enforce.
Attorney Dittman?
Sergeant Chris kind of hit on it, but I think the other one that'd be really easy to enforce would be that zoning regulation, saying if if it was the desire of the Board of Trustees not to have a gun shop at downtown Lyons, that'd be pretty easy to enforce, right? Is it have to go? It's prohibited under the zoning code, and so that I think that'd be also very easily enforced.
Yeah, and then I think we also want to think about, okay, so that's, we can decide, okay, no gun shops in commercial downtown. Do we want to think about expanding that to the entire town? What about the Eastern Corridor? So, I think we just need to think about that. And then, so there are no federally licensed dealers in town limits. There's a couple outside of town limits, on Apple Valley Road, and I think one in Stone Canyon. So another thing to think about, I think, is these ordinances that wouldn't apply to the town of Lyons. Like, we don't have a gun shop, so gun shop signage doesn't really make sense. Do we want to proactively enact them in case there is a gun shop eventually? I don't know, but I think, let's take a look at what applies to our community. And then, also weighing that there are ordinances that make us feel safer, and there are ordinances that actually make us safer, and they might not be the same. Weighing that against sending a message to our state government and federal government about what we as a community believe. Trustee Delman, we haven't heard from you at all. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
I don't have any questions. I'm learning a lot as I listen, and I don't think we should go too far, because it does turn people off too much. But I am for as much restriction as we think we can pass. So I guess I do think the age limit to 21 is important, as well as others, but I think that's one of the most important.
Okay. Trustee Edding?
Yeah, I was just, Sergeant Chris, your explanation was excellent. I do go up to Wyoming and fish, and I do not like to go into bars where people are carrying guns. It's a really, really unsettling feeling. And I own a gun, but I would never, ever do that. But I think this is all going to come down to is how proactive do we want to be? Are we looking for, what's that great phrase, the solution looking for a problem? I agree. I've never seen anybody carry an open gun in Lyons. And so I don't know why I want to make a big, huge deal if it's just simply something that hasn't happened. But on the other hand, I understand it could eventually happen. And do you want to stop it before? So I think that's going to be like kind of the moral crisis that we have, is how proactive we want to be and how much of a political statement do we want to have. The one other comment, and then I'll just finish, is it possible, if we don't want to create, any flack as far as, being sued, to evaluate what has been challenged in Colorado, what has survived a challenge, and gradually adopt things that have survived, because then we know, we probably won't have as much grief. I'll stop there, and I see Attorney Dittman, you raising your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we certainly have case law in the state of Colorado, pre-2022 about what, have been held to be permissible and what hasn't. And the problem, of course, is that, the Bruin case kind of we can't say for sure. There's been many cases since then. it could substantially change the calculus of what is permissible and what isn't. And so I think, the Superior case is at play. It may take a while. But the Superior case will give us a good idea. So assuming, there is not kicked down on procedural grounds about what the federal courts and the 10th Circuit believe is permissible and what's not. And so that's one option, is a way for superiors to go out. But I mean, also be proactive, is another option. And then if it turns out Superior loses on some of theirs, or they win it all, we can modify it accordingly. So that's purely within the policy prerogative of the Board of Trustees.
Yeah, and I'll add, Trustee Edding, that I actually have seen people open carrying in town, and it does happen. So
Yeah, I understand it probably has. I just wonder how pervasive it is.
yeah. Trustee Williams?
I just want to go on record as saying I do believe that we need to make a statement. I think we need to make it in a way that's public, in a way that speaks to the state legislature. And I do believe that restricting it to open carry at this point probably opens us to the least opportunity for a lawsuit and the easiest, clearly, for our police officers to be able to enforce.
You. Trustee Delman?
So I have to say, I don't remember ever having seen anybody in Boulder open carry, but there's got to be restrictions because we see what happened there. And I think it's really going to make a difference in crime here? No, but I do think it is important to make a statement to the state, and then if enough states do it, then federal, and at that point is when it will be able to make a difference.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just add for everybody's information that when I was speaking to Dustin's colleague, Alex, at Everytown, they indicated that it's actually more important for small towns like Lyons to enact legislation from the perspective of the state as a whole, because it really sends a message that, even it's literally every town, right? It's every town in America is concerned about gun violence prevention. So yes, Administrator.
I just want to mention that Trustee Dati, even though she's not here, she made it very clear and asked that we share during the workshop at least that she fully supports any action that we feel is defensible at this point, that would make a statement and potentially help someone stay safer.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, actually, I have. I'm going to go back to something that I tend to remember. So it's relevant, but a little bit off. And Sergeant Christ, I understood that at one point there was consideration of having the sheriff, the school resource officer, have in a locked box in his office at the school his weapon, for lack of a better word, I guess. And
his duty rifle.
Rifle, okay. But my impression is that did not go forward based on some backlash. And so currently at the school, he would, if there were some emergency situation, he would have to go out to his vehicle to bring his weapon in. And do we as a town have any influence on that at all?
Well, that's a school board
so
decision,
it's really interesting that you
right?
bring that up.
I'm sorry,
right.
what?
Yeah, that starts at the school board level. I'm sorry. It's interesting to bring that up because that does start at the school board level. And I do have a meeting set in early August with Superintendent Haddad, Dr. Haddad, over this topic. I brought it to his attention several times, and we have received some pushback on the heels of Texas and all that. Kind of my argument here is it's simply just placing a tool in the toolbox in an area that would be more beneficial than in his car. It's really as simple as that. But the public pushback that we got was just absolutely horrendous. When he took it to the town hall, meetings. We had one in Lyons at the high school and one at Sunset Middle School. Went up and down the scale with everything you can imagine being spoken. So he opted at that point to put more SROs in the school, which puts another officer and another gun in the school, which is great to have, and the school officers availability of another tool in the toolbox, if that tool is the most appropriate to take care of business and keep our children safe. It makes sense to me.
Thank you. So I want to be cognizant of time. We'll be talking about this obviously later in our meeting under general business. And I want to thank Dustin for coming and helping us out, and Sergeant Chris for spending some more time with the board. I know you love hanging out with us. And Attorney Dittman for a really excellent job putting together that presentation. It was really well done. And so, yes, Administrator Simonson.
I just have one more question. If any or all of these ordinances were to be passed, can the attorney touch upon who and how would the penalty be enforced? Would it be municipal court? Would it be district court? I can tell you that we see open carry in town hall regularly. It's not at all a surprise to see that to me. We see it regularly. We used to have people come into our board meetings open carry all the time. So, I mean, I would say it's a lot of people in town own guns and many are not afraid to carry them. But we do know that when people are carrying them in the parks and things like that, people do get uncomfortable. So anyway, I do want to point that to you guys because you may not be aware of that, but we see them regularly.
Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, to answer the question about how this would be enforced, I think it depends on what it is, right? I mean, I think a lot of these are going to be municipal offenses. For example, zoning violations, for example, licensing regulations. Otherwise, if it's something like the open carry, violation, I assume that'd be probably Sergeant Chris, one of his deputies, writing someone a ticket, whether it be in a municipal court or in a county court. Is it a criminal violation? No, it'd be a civil infraction. But unless someone again, the standard is set very clearly in state law. Someone has to knowingly be violating that statute, where they know that there's a restriction on open carry in Lyons, Colorado, and as a protester, very clearly opening has their weapon, that would be a criminal violation. But so it depends on what it is and how we write the ordinance.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and this may be common knowledge, but I just want to emphasize that open carrying of handguns, at least, is a loophole under Colorado law. You need to get a permit to carry a concealed firearm in Colorado, but you don't need to carry a handgun. It's sort of a historical artifact that a number of states have, where when they put in their concealed carry permitting regimes, they didn't, people weren't carrying. The threat wasn't people carrying open handguns, so that wasn't a thing that they did at the time. But many states have prohibited open carry since like the states came into the union. So it's just a loophole in Colorado law currently.
Thank you. I didn't know that. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break. We'll start our regular meeting at 7:05. Again, thank you, Dustin, for joining us. Thank you, Sergeant Chris, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. And Dustin, you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting. I'm sure you'll be thrilled to talk
riveting
about
content.
stuff.
So
Riveting. Thank you. So Mayor Pro Tem just texted me and let me know that her internet is down. Yeah, so I told her she can come to town hall, but I haven't heard back. So we might just want to give it a few minutes. I don't know if that means that other people's internet is down too or what.
Looks like we're missing a couple trustees.
Yeah. Trustee Edding, it's nice to see your forehead.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I wonder what internet service provider she has. Ours is fine.
Yeah, mine's fine too. Although, you know, like, knock on wood.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we need to wait till we have a quorum in any event, right?
Reagan?
Hello?
Hey, it's Jocelyn. Hello?
Hi, Jocelyn. What's going on?
Am I in the meeting?
You are.
Yeah, you are in the meeting.
Okay. Sorry, my internet's down, so I'm on the phone trying to follow along.
Okay. Okay. And hopefully your internet comes back up at some point, in which case you can log on to the Zoom. But Brandon, is phone acceptable in this
Yeah, we
case?
allowed for phone communication. We'll have to do a voice vote.
Okay.
We're still missing, we still need a couple more trustees though.
I could drive to town. I'm just wondering if other people are having internet issues as well.
Well, it looks like Trustee Dillman is logging on. And I know Trustee Elson said that he was going to be late. But we do have a quorum.
Now we do.
Okay. So so why don't we get started? Hopefully Trustee Elson will be here shortly, and hopefully we'll be able to see Mayor Pro Tem's face shortly. So I will call the Monday, July 18th, 2022 Town of Lyons Board of Trustees meeting to order. Clerk Vasquez, can we please have the roll?
Yes, Mayor Rogan,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell,
Present.
Trustee Delman,
Present.
Trustee Edding,
Present.
Trustee Williams,
Present.
Trustee Dottie, and Trustee Elson.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll read the land acknowledgement. We must acknowledge with respect as non-native people that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Trustee Delman. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Is there anything anyone would like to amend on the agenda? All right, I will call for the voice vote on the agenda.
Mayor Rogan,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell,
Aye.
Trustee Delman,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Trustee Edding.
Aye.
Motion
Thank you.
unanimously.
Thank you. We'll take a reflective moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. So now it's the time for audience business. If you would like to address the Board of Trustees, please know that you have 4 minutes and you'll need to state your full name and physical address, not PO box, for the record. Is there anyone who would like to address the Board of Trustees? And you can just raise your hand or turn on your camera, indicate however. I don't see anyone. Clerk Vasquez, do you?
No, I don't either.
Okay, then we will move into the Boulder County Sheriff's Report. Sergeant Chris, good evening.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. I've got a few items just to talk about real quick. First being National Night Out's coming up August 2nd. I think we'll have one more board meeting prior to that the night before on Monday. So National Night will be on Tuesday. We're going to be over in Bond Park. And working with Chief Zick and Deputy Mitch Roseborough from the school, and we're putting everything together, and it should be a really fun time. We got some really neat things for everybody to see and talk about, so we'll be over there that day. Our substation move over the depot is going pretty good. We had some major advancements over the past week with our computer stuff. The original hang up was looking like it was going to take us about another 75 to 80 days before the technology gurus could, but they were able to do a bridge, which basically allows us to work out of both buildings until we're out of the existing building and into the depot. My county architects and engineers have drafted up a plan for some of the furniture stuff putting in there in respects to the depot being a historic building and what we have to do to reside in there without altering anything. So that has been approved and ready to go. Let's see, last week I spent a lot of time down in Denver. The NASRO School National Association of School Resource Officers Conference was held in Colorado this year, which was a fantastic opportunity for us to meet as a group collectively throughout the state and the nation. We were able to network with a lot of great folks in the school resource officer business. Learned a lot, brought a lot of things back with our SROs to help keep our kids safe. Our ultimate goal. So we're really anxious to incorporate some of those things that we learned in the conference. We're also gearing up for Rocky Grass in a couple weeks. I've been meeting with Chief Zick and representatives over at Planet Bluegrass to get our medical plans, traffic plans, and all that in order. Should go seamlessly like it has in years past. And I know that the parks have been busy over the weekends for sure. This hot weather and a cool river, how can you not go to the parks over the weekend? So we have put back into play our extra duty signups for Saturday, Sundays for the sheriff's office. So I haven't reviewed any early signups, but from here through Labor Day, we've posted spots for deputies to come and help out.
But I'm just there and get on the internet and do it. Trustees.
Hey, Jocelyn. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. So they'll be in there hopefully helping out the camp host and security folks and everything there. And that is what I have for the board tonight.
All right. Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Sergeant Christ? No? All right. Well, thank you. Have a good evening and be safe out there.
Thank you very much. You too. Thank you.
All right. So Mayor Pro Tem is on her way into town hall. So she's listening on the phone, but we'll be able to see her shortly. So ordinances and public hearings, we have a first reading of ordinance 1124. Can we have a staff report, please?
Hello, Mayor and trustees. So this ordinance is an ordinance that does two things. One, it tries to put together in one location the various violations and the various portions of code that the code compliance officer is responsible for. Currently, you have to really go through the code and find in an individual location where that is. So the first part of this ordinance would help to indicate exactly which sections of code the code compliance official is responsible for. And then the second portion of this ordinance was to help in the compliance or enforcement areas that currently code compliance really has to work with a property address to try to do any type of violation noticing to issue a summons. And so in this, we were trying to give a little more authority, or at least document in the code what a code compliance official could do. A lot of that had come up with regards to, we know recently we've had a number of off-leash dog or dog concerns, and how the code compliance official can help out in the parks as well as around town. So the second portion of this does help document that the code official may issue administrative citations and municipal court summonses and complaints for violations and provisions of this code as they are listed in the code. And that was what that ordinance is for.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any questions for Director Kaplan? No? Okay. I just have one, and that is, and I take it that our code compliance officer is okay with all these changes, that he's good with the way this turned out.
Yes, he drafted most of it and then passed it by Victoria and myself, Administrator Simonson and myself.
Okay, terrific. Do I have a motion to approve? Trustee Williams.
I move to approve ordinance 1124, an ordinance adding an article 9 to section 2 of the Lions Municipal Code concerning code compliance officials' responsibilities.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Trustee Edding. So there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Comments? All right. Well, I will then call for the vote. Clerk Vasquez.
Mayor Rogan,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell.
You may have to unmute her.
Okay, and I'm unsure if she can unmute and drive. So we'll go on. Trustee Edding,
Aye.
Trustee Williams,
Aye.
Trustee Delman,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hello?
I
Okay,
sure
aye.
can. Aye, perfect. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being so flexible through this technology challenge. So Next up, we have the consent agenda. Clerk Vasquez, would you please read the consent agenda into the record?
I sure will. Item 1 is Resolution 2022-71, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, amending the Personnel Handbook and ratifying the Juneteenth holiday. Item 2 is Resolution 2022-72, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, selecting Colorado Retirement Association for retirement broker services. Item 3 is Resolution 2022-73, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the Board of Trustees July 5th, 2022 decision to accept cash in lieu of water rights dedication from Spirit Hound Distillers. Item 4 is Resolution 2022-74, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, waiving the water rights dedication requirement for 423 Street subdivision application. Item 5 is Resolution 2022-75, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the First Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement with Kumar and Associates Incorporated for the Great Outdoors Colorado, the GOCO Black Bear Hole and Second Avenue Trailhead Project. Item 6 is the July accounts payable. Item 7 are the July 5th, 2022 Board of Trustees meeting minutes. And item 8 are the July 11th, 2022 Special Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Trustee Edding?
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Trustee Williams?
I second that motion.
Thank you. And I think Administrator Simonson is helping get Mayor Pro Tem settled here. I'll ask while they're
something.
okay. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, can I'd like to pull the employee handbook, please.
Thank you. That's resolution 2022-71. Any other, any other trustees like to pull anything from the consent agenda? No? All right, then we'll vote on the consent agenda minus item 1. Clerk Vasquez.
Mayor Rogan,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell,
Aye.
Edding,
Aye.
Trustee Williams,
Aye.
Trustee Delman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, would you like to speak to the item removed from consent agenda, or because we talked about it, would you like me to?
Would you mind? I'm in the building, but I'm still trying to get there hooked up.
You bet. So there were a couple of items in the employee handbook that Mayor Pro Tem identified a couple, and I identified a couple that we brought to staff's attention. And so I think what we would like to do is allow staff to address those items in conjunction with the HR consultant, and then bring this back to the next consent agenda. So Attorney Dittman, I'm not sure whether how to do that.
So I think we need to move to, a date certain, that's probably the easiest way to do that. So move it to August 1st, I think.
Okay, great. So so I would like to make a motion to move resolution 2022-71 to August 1st. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Is there any discussion? No? Nice to see you, Mayor Pro Tem. Can we have the vote, Clerk Vasquez?
Yes, Mayor Rogan,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell,
Aye.
Edding, Trustee Edding.
Aye.
Thank you. Trustee Delman
Aye.
and Trustee Williams.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Boy, we are a resilient bunch. So next up is boards and commissions, and I see we have our woman of the hour on the Zoom, Crystal DeCoster. Hi, Crystal. Do you feel like coming on camera? There she is. So under boards and commissions tonight, we wanted to acknowledge and honor Crystal's service to the LAHC over how many years?
10, 11.
Wow. Wow. You have done so much to promote arts in this town, and you do every single day. I know that's what you do in your life, and it really makes a huge difference in this town. And I know that you're moving on to work with the creative district and help that flourish the way that you've helped the LAHC flourish over the years. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I know this board of trustees is so incredibly grateful to you. And this isn't typical, but if anybody else would like to say a few words to Crystal, please feel free.
Aw.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Crystal, I just want to say thank you so much. Having gotten to work with you on the Arts and Humanities Commission for quite a number of years, 2, 3, 4 years now. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I've learned so much from you personally. And so thank you. You've been a great mentor to me.
Yes. Thank all of you. It's an easy task to do. We touch the arts everywhere, and the arts touch us everywhere. So in this town, it's amazing. Thank you very much. I'm beyond honored. Thank you.
Well, we wish we could be doing this in person. So maybe we'll at some point be able to schedule a publicly noticed gathering with you and the Board of Trustees to celebrate.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I would also like to appoint Lori Cram to the Historic Preservation Commission. All right. So moving on to general business, we have the Spirit Hound Distillers Development Plan Review requests. Staff report, please.
So just to make sure I know the process clearly, I thought I would present what the request was, give some background on what the standards would be, and then why they're requesting that they're making this request, and then the trustees, you would have some understanding of what the standard process would be. Then we would have their report and then comments from staff again. Or so
Does that, Attorney Dittman, does that work for you?
Yeah, I think staff report, applicant report, any sort of staff response, and then open it up for a motion, a second discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so Spirit Hound Distillers did submit the first phase of a planned 2-phase development review. And in this current phase of their development, they were not going to be doing any building. And so they were requesting to be allowed to follow the minor development review process. Now, it's helpful to understand that there are 3 forms of a building permit application. A minor building permit, which is what would be used for smaller scale standard construction, doing a new roof, putting in some new windows. You then have a minor development review, which gets a little more complicated, and a major development review. So this would fall into the major development review process, but only because it has the addition of 10 parking spaces. So in the major development review, or in the development review process, a major development review is considered to be a review that has, there are 4 or 5 different items that really push it from a minor development review to a major development review. Multifamily residential uses shall be subject to major development review approval track. Major structural alterations in exterior load-bearing building walls or roofs to an extent of 50% or more. Commercial accommodation uses, where you'll have new construction of 7 or more guest rooms. Expansion of more than 2,000 square feet, or when you have new parking. I was going to get to the actual code. Alteration of a site that includes 10 or more parking spaces be reconfigured, along with relocation or alteration of street access. That was the one item that would push this into the major development review. And so that's one of 2 waivers that was being requested by Spirit Hound Distillers, is that could they follow the minor development review process instead of the major? And the difference is the minor development review process goes to administrative review. The major development review process goes to the PCDC and then the Board of Trustees for both of their review. It's the same set of requirements for both review processes. It's really who does that makes the difference between the minor development review and the major development review. The second request Spirit Hound Distillers had was if their parking lot could be, let me switch back over, gravel instead of being paved. So we do have an ordinance that was included in the packet that describes or details the municipal code that says the parking lot in this instance would need to be a paved parking lot. And so Spirit Hound Distillers has had concerns with the floodplain based on their location, or the stormwater and the floodplain, a combination. And so was requesting to waive the requirement to have a paved parking lot, and if they could install a gravel-based parking lot instead. So with that, I would say we could go to the requester's presentation.
Is the applicant here? Is that Matt or Mark or both? Or James?
It's Matt, Mark, and James.
Okay.
And Matt.
I'm James Waller. I'm with Kimley Horn, the civil engineering and landscape architecture consultant for Spirit Hound and Matt. Mark, you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, my name is Mark Ford. I'm with Romero Ford Architects out of Boulder, and we're working with Matt on the architecture revisions to the distillery.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Rooney. I'm one of the partners at Spirit Hound Distillers. I used to live in town, but now I live out on 1636 Apple Valley. I believe we're supposed to indicate our address when we speak. Is that correct?
Just during public comment, but appreciate the extra information anyway.
My favorite color is purple. I like Forrest Gump.
So I saw that you all sent over some drawings, but it was too late to be included in the packet. And so I'm not sure, I know I didn't get a chance to look at them this afternoon. I don't know if any of the other trustees did, but as part of your presentation, if you have those pulled up and it's pertinent and you want to share your screen, please feel free to do that.
So can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
So what we're looking here are 3D views of the proposed facade renovation of the building. Here on the north side, we're proposing a new entryway, which would involve removing the existing porch roof and replacing it with a new covered porch and walkway that would connect to the parking lot, which is here on the west side of the structure. So this new structure it's all primarily just aesthetics in terms of how it affects the existing building. We're not making any modifications to the existing structure. We're just merely providing a new roof covering over the new pathway from the proposed parking lot to the entrance of the existing distillery. On the west side that faces the parking lot, we are relocating the two existing shipping containers that are on the east side. We're moving them to the west side and building a covered outdoor patio for additional outdoor tasting space for the distillery. And then you can see in this lower image here, we have some additional covered patio space that stretches to the south, which is more of a shade trellis area. So this entire area is all constructed of timber frame construction. And it's really just to enhance the exterior of the building and provide some additional public spaces for people that visit the distillery. And this kind of grew out of the need to update the building and create a safe connection from the existing or the proposed parking lot on the west to the existing distillery. So that's all I have for the architecture portion.
Okay.
I can share
Great.
my. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. And what else do we have from the applicant?
We have our civil development plan that has been submitted to the city for the review, and that's okay. I'd like to go into a couple of the different items that we are requesting variances on.
You bet.
Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So our property is going to be connecting to Lot 1 Vasquez Plaza to the west of us. That shows a connection where we're going to be proposing a cross-access drive between the two lots. The existing driveway cuts along Highway 36 are to remain in the same location but be enhanced per the Town of Lyons and CDOT standards. The drainage on the site is going to improve with the proposed site improvements. Right now, the parking lot to the west is a pretty caked in dirt lot that doesn't provide the impervious value for floodplain and runoff reason for runoff that you would typically see of typical soil. To get a little more, to get a couple different ideas related to the improvements on our site, we're proposing gravel improvements in the western parking lot, except for the 2 ADA stalls that are required per calculations, where those are going to be concrete to meet ADA requirements. This gravel has a higher impervious value than asphalt, which will help in the aid of any floodplain issues. Related to the floodplain adjacent to our site, on the survey that was pulled from Flatirons Incorporated, which is a registered land surveyor in the state of Colorado, the floodplain improvements are not to be within any structures of our site. Zone AE is a floodplain level that would require any floodplain certification or additional studies to show that you are not decreasing the floodplain area and thus impacting different sites. All of our improvements are going to be within the Zone X shaded and Zone X unshaded area. We're following existing drainage conditions and modifying our land use to decrease runoff. With that, we are not proposing any utility improvements on our site, as any utility improvements will be pulled off the internal plumbing. We're enhancing the site with different kinds of bike parking, motorcycle parking, bringing ADA parking up to code, and providing an excess of parking while also improving the floodplain. Any questions related to that?
I think we're going to hold questions
Okay.
for a little bit, if I have that right, Attorney Dittman. Okay, if you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um,
I
Is-
think if you want to ask questions of the applicant right now, you can do that.
oh, great. Okay. Okay, Trustee Edding, did you have a question?
Yeah, just one question. So the unpaved parking lot, people have requested that in the past, and I believe the one intelligent comment that was made is the area of the parking lot where you accelerate to go from stop to onto 66. Will that be gravel, or will there be concrete, at least at that one space where you accelerate onto the highway?
There will be concrete. We'll be
Perfect.
matching CDOT and lines details
All right, I'm
accordingly.
all good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, please.
You go first.
No, you.
Okay. I was just wondering, because it is up in the air, it has not been determined at this point, but the trail, there's potential trail development along the easement in the back of the property. Do you have any plans to be allowing access from the trail into your parking area for cyclists or something?
Yes, that trail connection lies solely connecting to the sidewalk along Highway 36 on Lot 1 adjacent to us. And with the improvements that are going to be coming at a later date along Highway 36, there will be ADA access along Highway 36 within an access easement and within the right of way along Highway 36. So in the ultimate condition, yes, when this first gets completed, it will not be, we will not have access based off that trail.
So the trail specific though is behind the property between it and the river.
Yes.
Okay, I'm misunderstanding then. It sounded like you were talking about 36 on the highway itself.
There's a connection from the trail south of our site to the sidewalk along Highway 36 that will ultimately serve our site. So it will be along the western side of our site.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? Okay. I have a couple. So what do the driveway improvements that you mentioned include?
The driveway as it stands right now, it's cracked and does not meet Town of Lyons and CDOT details, standard details based off of the width and how the curb cut is formed right now. It goes down from a 6-inch vertical curbing gutter and just basically goes to the gutter itself, where now we're going to be reconstructing a portion of it for better access. And we're going to be, according to our plan, it basically forms a little L or a little wing, which helps access as you come on and off of Highway 36 to not crack curb and other public improvements that would need to be replaced.
Okay. And then, so that passageway between your property and the Vasquez property, I assume that the Vasquezes have okayed that. And I wonder, and this might be a question for staff, I wonder if do we need an official agreement between the two parties, or how does that work?
I believe there's a cross-access easement that is already being dedicated through the town right now, or has already been dedicated. Matt, I know that you are discussing with the neighbors pretty frequently. Do you know where the processing of that easement stands?
To make sure I understand correctly, are we talking about Raul Vasquez's leased property from the Town of Lyons, or the, for lack of a better word, the pot shop to our west?
I think
The
both.
shop to the
If I could-
west.
I can
Yeah,
speak to it.
Oh, thank you, Aaron.
Or, I mean, Matt may have more information from the developers there directly, but so there is an easement on that property that was dedicated as part of their development agreements to run from the sidewalk that they are installing there was some discussion with them on that, and they decided to go ahead and move forward with that sidewalk. And then they have an easement they have granted the town from that sidewalk back to the town property that Raul currently leases. So that, I believe, is the access easement that's being talked about to get to the path, that would be shared by both properties, potentially.
Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. And their parking spot only has 6 spaces. We have substantially more. And so we're going to have an easement to share parking, as well as from a safety standpoint, their curb cut from Route 36 is at a much safer location. It's further from the gas station, and it's at the apex of the curve on Route 36, so you can see further down the road. So we're going to be directing our traffic to enter through that, just from a safety standpoint.
I see. That makes sense. Mayor Pro Tem.
I was just going to see if you could show us, like bring up the image maybe and show us specifically. I'm having a hard time visualizing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I can start looking for it, get it, but it'll take me a minute.
And I can pull up the approved plans, Aaron, that have been distributed to us from the town as well. So the access, Mayor Pro Tem, would come off of Highway 36 via a curb cut here and route through the site around here. And I can get the approved plans up, showing our neighboring site and how they are routing through the site as well.
So while you're doing that, I'm curious if I may ask a question, Mayor Rogan.
Of course.
I do see also the driveway in and out that you have proposed curb cut. It looked like 24.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that's feet.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So technically speaking, if I'm understanding correctly, somebody could pull in there that's planning to go over to the, I don't know the name of the weed shop, but we'll just call them that as well. So in other words, there's going to be people that could come in through both sides and cross through if necessary. And
Correct.
That's okay. Okay.
Yep.
And I do have, if I could share the screen with you.
Yep.
Oh, you already have it?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. And it is, I believe, Line Dispensary. We want to go by the name, at least that I've heard them going by. And this
Thank
is the
you.
Line Dispensary lot and the building that is up there now. And their parking, 6 that they show. And then it's easier to start from the back because there's a lot of utilities involved in there. But this is the trail that's proposed to be behind on the town property that Raul Vasquez currently leases from us. And this would be a path from there. Again, you're seeing a lot of the utility that's also underneath there, but there's the path to the sidewalk that they have. So that would connect, and there's an easement that's been granted to the town for that.
Thank you for the visual. That's much more helpful.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Director Kaplan?
Well, Administrator Simonson had her hand up. I did.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Administrator Simonson?
Thank you. And Attorney Dittman, please tell me if this is going to go, there's potential for minor review if I should not be asking questions now.
No, I think you can ask questions. Yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering, has the engineering firm worked with CDOT, because we have this access agreement already with them? And is this in line with what they're proposing happens here?
We reached out to CDOT and corresponded with them. I believe everything should be. But if you have a contact that the town likes to reach out to with CDOT, we are more than happy to coordinate with them our proposed development plan to make sure it's in line with what they would like.
Yeah, because they are definitely trying to reduce access easement on this curve. And so I would not want to approve it without knowing it meets, what we agreed to with them as well.
Understood.
And then second of all, in regard to floodplain, the floodplain map that's in the packet is not the correct one. That looks like it is Mr. Vasquez's property. This property is actually about half 500-year floodplain and half 100-year floodplain, the parking lot is. And as such, the town does not, the only place that we prefer not to have asphalt is in the floodway, just FYI for the board. I think we've all seen this lot when it's wet, it's pretty messy. I understand the impervious part, but I don't think it's soaking in. I think it's just making mud puddles there. But I would be interested to know what you're thinking you're going to do, because you're showing lined lots with parking stalls and you can't do that on dirt. So I would be interested to know more about that plan. Are you going to do at least some road base instead of just mud? How are you going to mark your parking spots?
We were discussing with the client on how to mark the parking spots, being a little more aesthetically pleasing. Matt, I know we were talking about putting logs through there or something to delineate the different parking spots where it's not something that is permanent, but it's a delineator that can be easily distinguished whether we get half an inch of snow or it's a sunny day like today. Regarding the imperviousness, we were discussing previously that the existing condition as today is, you're right, it's a mud pit. It does not seep into the ground at all. What we're looking to do is improve that with the gravel, where gravel has a 40% impervious value, where water would be able to seep into the gravel base below. We would make sure to discuss with our geotech engineer what cross section they would recommend for aggregate base and gravel on top. Typical, like you would see in a civil document, where it would be asphalt section and then base below that.
Can I have a follow-up, Mayor? So just a couple comments, and I have not reviewed this at an administrative level, waiting to hear if the board wanted it to go through planning commission or to staff. So these, this may not be pertinent right now, but I do find it interesting that when Agati built the new dispensary, they did not get an exception for asphalt. Plus they had to put in storm drainage. As we all know, this area was flooded, and it looks so nice over there with the asphalt, and this is such a prime corridor coming into town. So I do want the board, just to think about that a little bit, and what is the visual you want here. The building looks beautiful for the architect. It's a really nice upgrade to the current visual, so that's great. But those are some things that if the board decides, I think the real issue tonight is, are you going to pursue a minor or a major development review? So I don't know how detailed we're supposed to get here tonight, since Planning Commission has not made a recommendation.
Yeah. Thank you, Administrator Simonson, and appreciate that context. Director Kaplan, is there a staff recommendation?
So yes, staff, and again, would follow up with what Administrator Simonson had mentioned. The planning staff had looked at that. We do now have the asphalt parking lot that went in at the Lions dispensary. There's asphalt to the east side also, with the Circle K gas station and the Clark's Hardware there. So that was one consideration from the planning perspective of having asphalt in there. And that the dispensary did also, as Administrator Simonson mentioned, put in storm drainage to deal with the water that they would have to deal with from their parking and their building. So it is an option, and it's why we wanted to come to the trustees to see, overall what they would want on the parking lot materials. We may want to also include in there's some discussion of the sidewalk. Otherwise, we might be coming back for a sidewalk also, because we had initially been talking about whether we would do cash in lieu. Also at the dispensary, they decided and put in the sidewalk as was required per their development plan. And so we do now have sidewalk going in there. And would that be, that is something that is documented? You could do a cash in lieu instead. So I didn't know, if we're talking about paving versus not paving the parking lot, that may also be something to discuss. For the minor versus major, staff did feel that this was something that could fall under the minor development review. It was the parking alone that would push it to be something that would go to the major review of trustees and PCDC. But again, was leaving it up if the parking concerns, they're the number of parking, not the material. But if the number of parking stalls, having 10 stalls there, would push it up to where the trustees felt they wanted to review it because of that, then you could request that. But otherwise, staff was comfortable with it as a minor development review.
Great, thank you very much. Is there, yes, Mr. Rooney?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of follow-ups from Administrator Simonson. With this current plan, we'll be decreasing the entrance and exit, ingress, egress by one. Currently, people pull into the gas station and the distillery at once, and it's a very convoluted, unsafe situation. So by utilizing these two ingress egresses to the west, it decreases that problem. As far as if we have to go paved with a flood storage or water storage, we lose a great deal of parking. And as most people know, that parking lot fills up. And so parking's really important for us, and we'd love not to lose parking spaces. Furthermore, the way it's sloped, that storage would be towards the west. And if it ever overflowed, it would flood our existing building as well as the gas station next door.
Thank you for that. Mayor Pro Tem.
For clarification, when you say storage, I'm not sure I'm following what you're referring to.
James could probably speak to this better, but it is
Stormwater.
Stormwater gets put into a holding pond, essentially.
Yeah, it's a detention pond where it has a set release rate based off of the amount of flow that's going into it.
Thank you. So I have kind of a procedural question. Is it possible, would it be possible to declare this minor and then still send the parking issue over to the PCDC for their input?
You may get a condition of the approval of the minor, potentially. Aaron, what are your thoughts on that?
I would think so. Again, it sounds procedural, whether it would be allowed. I would think from a planning perspective, that would be fine. That, then you can get the PCDC's input on it.
Yeah, I think procedurally you can make it a condition of approval. I said no, if whether it made sense from the planning commission's workload and expertise, whether that made sense from your perspective.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Waller, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the existing condition versus the proposed condition related to the pavement section. Along the west side where we're proposing to put gravel is the existing mud pit where we're looking to increase or better the runoff and all that. So then to the north of our site, we're looking to remove and replace the asphalt that is there currently to provide better drainage as it goes to the existing storm sewer inlet along the north side of our property. And then along the east side, as we go up against the gas station and the landscape island there, we're looking to improve the drainage condition to keep our drainage, or the water that falls on our site, and dissipate it in a safe manner in the following existing drainage patterns.
Thank you. Okay, Director Kaplan.
I did just have the detention facility to see if you wanted to see how that looked like on the space for the Lions dispensary. I could share my screen and you can see the outline on the drawings for that.
Yes, please, let's take a look.
So this is the detention pond that they built. Right, so that's all becomes unusable space there because it's sunken in and can hold water in a storm.
Mhm. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Waller, an additional comment?
Yes, apologies. Just related to the potential detention requirements for our site. In the drainage letter that we submitted to the city, we're demonstrating that we are decreasing the amount of runoff that's coming off our site, thus improving the condition as it is today.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
I know nobody likes the mud puddles. All right, any trustees have any additional questions either for staff or the applicant? Okay, what about comments? Trustee Edding?
Has the PCDC been asked, not necessarily about the parking lot and everything, but have they been asked about the major versus minor aspect of this? Is the PCDC okay with this being a minor development review?
No, because they were coming to the Board of Trustees with this request, so.
Okay, all right.
You first.
Okay, then question number two, just to make sure I got this all straight. The second part of this was some variances, but there was only one variance that I know of, and that's the gravel as opposed to the pavement. Did I miss it? Is there any other variances?
I think they were considering to make it minor versus major.
Oh, okay. I guess that.
One.
No, I think there's an off-street parking, isn't there? Variance?
I thought the two requests were making it a minor development review because we only had the 10 parking spaces that would push it to a major. And then the request on there is for the not to have asphalt for the material of the parking lot.
Oh,
The off-street parking that we submitted is related to the pavement type on the site.
what does that have to do with off-street?
It's just off of any public street. It's on private property.
Comments from other trustees? Mayor Pro Tem?
Because this is a general discussion, are we, for clarification, it's because it's been a while for me, so I could use it. Are we just giving direction at this point, or are we making a vote here? Could I have some clarification so that my comments, I'm wondering if I'm supposed to make my comments now or wait for, I guess that's my question first. Depends on how much I get to say.
I mean, I think we're making a determination whether this is a minor or a major review. I mean, is that correct?
So if that's the case, I mean, I would recommend that this go through the minor review process. I don't think this seems to be a intensely complicated thing. And I also, though, well, a couple of things. One is I absolutely think that we should consider and look at a pervious ground parking space. We have it all over town, our parks. have it. And I think it can be done really well and look very nice if maybe we could set the minimum standard as to what Laverne M. Johnson Park looks like and Bone Park parking looks like. Although I do think that from a business standpoint, it would be, good to recommend sidewalks and making sure that your curbs and gutters, et cetera, are done well. But I personally believe that I think it's a great idea. I think it's actually, I'm bummed that the Lions Dispensary has already done their parking spot the way they have, because this could have been incorporated together. And I think that would have actually looked even better. But from an environmental standpoint, having water going into the ground versus running off into the river, I think that's really important with businesses along the river. And I would recommend not necessarily put this to the PCDC and delay the process, as instead, I would recommend that we ask the PCDC to look at this from a design guideline standard going forward. And because I actually think that we could change the design guidelines and make some adjustments around not everything being paved. Some places it is necessary. I think gas stations should be paved. But we have a lot around town that's not. And I think it's okay. It doesn't bother the aesthetics necessarily, in my opinion. So that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I'll tell you that that the reason the dispensary paved their parking lot is because that's what's required by the code.
Okay.
So, yes, Attorney Dittman.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if you want to put a motion on the table to that effect to approve the minor process for this before we move any forward. I mean, that's the board's decision is to make whether it's a minor or a major process. So
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Farrell, would you like to make a motion to make this a minor process?
Sure. I move to make this a minor process.
Terrific. Is there a second to that motion?
I second that motion.
Thank you. I don't think we need to do a roll call vote anymore because I think we're all on here. So all in favor of this being a minor, please raise your hand.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, terrific. Attorney Dittman.
yeah, there was some discussion about having a condition of approval on that. I was just curious the board whether that was under consideration or not.
Well, I'm not sure. I'd like to hear from the other board members what they think about the asphalt versus gravel first. Is that proper, Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably would have been better to do it before we passed it on, final, to have the amendment prior, but we can recall that vote if we need to.
Okay, sorry about that. Trustee Williams, did you have a thought about the pavement type?
I do. I'm just as confused as to why we would not require it to be asphalt. Yes, asphalt is less, water. I'm not convinced that there's a good reason for this to be done with gravel. I have not heard anything really compelling on that yet.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Edding?
I have no issue with the asphalt. I like the idea that you get more parking spaces. So I think that that's important. Maybe I just have one more question for the civil engineer. I've heard conflicting stories about how much more impervious gravel is over asphalt. And someone was telling me it's actually not that much more impervious, just a little bit, but not that much. Was that guy was he right?
So I can quote a couple different drainage criteria manuals up and down the Front Range from like Fort Collins to, there's the Mile High Flood District that a lot of municipalities follow. And Aaron, you can chime in if I'm speaking out of turn, but typically pavement and roof areas have a 90% to 100% impervious area. So if a raindrop falls on it, 0.9 of the raindrop or 100% of the raindrop will continue to flow. The lowest is when you get down to a soil that has a cross section that is good for drainage. That gets down to about a 2% impervious value. That means a lot, like 0.02 of that one drop will actually run off. Gravel, based off of previous designs that I have done and with different municipalities, has an assumed impervious value of 40%. So it's better than asphalt. It's not as good as as just typical landscaping, but I can't remember which trustee mentioned it, but it is dependent on the cross section of it that we would look for the geotech recommendation based off of that.
All right, thank you.
So, Trustee Edding, which way are you leaning on this?
I'm totally for the gravel, no problem. Totally for the minor subdivision, although this minor development review, we already voted on that. I have no issues with the PCDC looking at it, at least as an exercise. I'm done, thanks.
Yeah, Trustee Delman?
So what's the difference in the number of parking spaces in there between asphalt and gravel?
So we are proposing 6 asphalt parking spaces that are going to be provided for motorcycle parking. We were proposing 2 concrete parking spaces for the ADA stalls. We use concrete because it is easier to form to meet, form the actual stalls to meet ADA criteria to make sure it's not sloping too high. The remaining stalls will be gravel.
And so if the whole thing were asphalt, what's the difference in number of parking spaces?
Sorry, there's 33 stalls. So all 33 would be asphalt versus 16, 24, 9, versus 33 are gravel.
So it would be the same?
No, James, what he's asking is the size of the detention pond would remove a number of parking spaces. We've to answer you, we've never done the design with asphalt and a detention pond, but we have looked at that adjoining property. That's about half of ours.
Mm-hmm.
And they have 6 parking spaces and their detention pond is about that size. So if we roughly estimate, we'll go down to about 15 parking spaces. 16.
Apologies on that, Trustee Delman.
That's okay. I probably didn't ask it clearly. Thank you, but I am leaning towards gravel.
Trustee Williams?
Yep, thanks for the clarification. I'm fine with gravel now that I understand it fully.
Well, and I actually am for asphalt, but I think that I'm outvoted here. I do think that we should, moving forward to Mayor Pro Tem's suggestion, take a look at the design guidelines and see where we can incorporate, where it makes sense, gravel. But I do believe that the direction of the board is for this property to use gravel in the parking lot. Does that make sense? Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, I have a question for Administrator Simons to make sure we're covering everything we need to. Do we need to go run through all the requested variances, or I'm sort of confused. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what is being all requested at this point.
You're muted.
I could reply too then. The 2 waivers were what was requested. 2 waiver requests were one for this to be a minor development review rather than a major development review. And the other waiver request they submitted was asking if they could use gravel for their parking lot rather than asphalt.
Okay,
but those were the only 2 requests.
Is making sure we are covering, considering we're talking about other things as well. And so to make sure we're hitting all the points we need to. So I think at this point, if you all agree, we have a separate vote on the gravel versus on the waiver request for the gravel for the asphalt And that would cover our bases, I think, at this point. If there's no referral or any sort of additional conditions we want to place on those motions.
Does anyone have any
Administrator
conditions?
Simonson.
Victoria Simonson?
I just need some clarification. I'm kind of confused. If this is going to be minor administrative, why are we having the board vote on things tonight?
Because there was 2 waiver requests. I mean,
But
one,
isn't that administrative in decision?
I think the board is free to waive its own land use code is why we're here. And so the board,
Without going through the planning commission and hearing a recommendation?
that's what's being requested, I believe. I mean, we need to pull up and I apologize. I didn't know this involved, I was not really a part of the discussion on this one. Under what section of the code is being applied for the waiver? Aaron, you're muted.
Yeah, I started to try to pull up the actual code, right? Do we want to read the waiver, right? Was for the paving, our team would request the Spirit Hound project to have the off-street parking pavement requirements waived due to floodplain concerns per the Town Lines Municipal Code 16-8-20B. The project is proposing to provide gravel in lieu of asphalt pavement for off-street parking. I do see now, we didn't really talk about that before. What happens when this gets approved as a minor? Does that mean it then does that make any difference? What I saw Administrator Simonson sort of was going toward.
Yeah,
and that was a question that I asked earlier too, I think, although maybe I didn't ask it quite as well. So,
I mean, we're not approving it tonight. It's also go through administrative review. I think what's being asked is a waiver of 2, from my understanding, a waiver of 2 provisions. And I'm just to Administrator Simonson's point, where does it provide for in the code we can make those waivers, absent a Board of Adjustments hearing?
I'm a little confused by process. Sorry, we don't do this often. The last time was main stage. But I do think it's for the board to be making a recommendation like gravel and no storm drainage. What's to keep everyone on a commercial district from coming in and saying, I want a gravel lot? I mean, it feels like we should have some rationale here because the floodplain one doesn't float. This isn't the zone where we require not to have asphalt. So unless it's just financial, or shouldn't they still have storm drainage with a gravel lot? I just have lots of questions and I'm kind of confused why this is going to if it's going to be minor, then I think staff should be allowed administratively to make the decisions. If not, then it sounds like it's major and these guys are making decisions to waive code.
Administrator Simonson, we do have.
Excuse me, Mr. Rooney, we wait to be recognized if you don't mind.
Of course, sorry.
So is it possible then and this is becoming a much more complex issue than I anticipated as well. So is it possible to ask the PCDC for their recommendation about the asphalt versus gravel issue?
I think we can always refer items to the PCDC. I just want to make sure that this is even the proper venue to do this. And so maybe what might make sense is a request for a 5-minute recess to confer.
That would be great. Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute recess, and Attorney Dittman, you'll come back in 5 minutes and let us know more about process.
Yeah, I'm going to call Administrator Simonson, and then we'll come back and make sure that we're doing this correctly. I'm confused the way this was originally presented. It's becoming much more of a Leviathan than maybe we originally thought.
Yeah, I think so. So I'll tell you what, let's, in lieu of our 9 o'clock break, let's take a little bit longer break right now. We'll take 10 minutes and then we'll carry on from there. That's a great suggestion, Attorney Dittman. Thank you. So we'll see y'all in 10 minutes.
Yep.
I'll call you on cell phone so we can merge in Mr. Kaplan too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My video is still blocked, Mayor Rogan.
Oh, thank you for letting me know. All right, let's get going. Trustee Delman, I'm sure will join us in a moment.
Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and lead us in the discussion. So I apologize that I did not know that this was going to be as expansive as what has become. I think based on several considerations, one being that, the Board of Trustees was not presented with all the information until shortly before the meeting. Two, I think that one of the requests may not even be within the jurisdiction of the Board of Trustees, that it may need to go for the Board of Adjustments rather than the Board of Trustees. And then two, I think we need to just understand better what the nature of the request is in the process, that we would, as staff, request that this be continued to a date certain. And it may have to come back in a different form. I think there's, the Board of Trustees can decide whether it's a minor or a major potentially, but I'm not seeing the code support that's not anything in the packet that they can decide. The board can decide to waive the requirement, the other code requirements, so that may need to be before a different body. And so I wasn't involved in the preparation of a lot of this, but now that we're all looking at it together, I think that may be another issue. So it's to everyone's benefit that this is going to be legally upholdable in the future if other parties wish to challenge it, that we do this the right way, which would require this being continued to the next meeting.
Okay, and continue it to the August 1st meeting, would that give staff enough time?
I think so. I think we can figure it out.
Okay, then do we need a motion to continue this to the next meeting?
Yeah, we'll need a motion to continue.
Okay, is there a motion to continue this to a date certain August 1st meeting?
I move that we continue this to a date certain August 1st meeting, and I still can't turn on my video.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Williams. Is there a second?
I second.
Terrific. Since we can't see Trustee Williams, can we have a roll call vote, please? Oh, there she is. Okay, all in favor of continuing this to date certain August 1st?
Passes unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Real quick, Attorney Dittman, I have a question. We had a motion that passed. What happened with that?
It was recalled. The
Okay.
vote was recalled for reconsideration. So if we want, we could vote to, make it official to the. And I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I
this
just
is a
wanted to
huge
make
mess.
sure I didn't miss something. Yeah.
Yeah, we recalled that vote. If you want to make it, we can just be extra doubly sure, or you can have a vote whether that the previous motion be put back under consideration to be considered on August 1st.
Okay, I think let's do that. Is there a motion for the previous issue to be reconsidered on August 1st?
I move that the motion be the original motion be reconsidered on August 1st.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Apologies for all the confusion. We're going to move on the agenda now. So we will, I'm sure, see you on August 1st. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is discussion direction to staff on updating building regulations to the 2018 or 2021 suite of international code. I'm afraid Director Kaplan, you are up again.
Yeah, let me get caught up here. The building code. Okay. So right, the simple aspects of this is that the town is looking at adopting, the newer international suite of codes. A lot of times you hear it as the International Building Code, but to be clear, there are a number. The mechanical code is the IMC, the fire code is the IFC, the International Plumbing Code is the IPC, and so it is a whole suite of codes. So I've tried to put that into my cover memo to help understand that we're not talking about just the IBC, that is one of the entire suite of codes. And so we were looking at going to the 2018 codes based on a recommendation from our contracted building inspection company. And then it also came up that the fire department is looking at going to the 2021 International Fire Code. So we started to discuss how we wanted to move forward with the code decision. Do we want to try to go just to the 2018? Do we want to try to go to a combination thereof? Do we want to try to go fully to the 2021? Is it too much and we need to stick to 2015, which I don't think anyone wants to do, but it would be an option out there. So looking back at what we did for the 2015 code, all of the codes were accepted except the International Fire Code. Back when we took on the update in 2018 to move to the 2015 codes, that got pulled. The trustees at the time, the board at the time was concerned. In particular, I remember I was involved a little bit on that, maybe from the utility board or listening in with the sprinklers and the cost that would be, I believe was the biggest concern. I don't know if there's another concern that would be out there, but requiring single family homes to be sprinkled. So that got pulled and there was further discussion on that. And then it was adopted. Actually, that one became an adoption by resolution. So it doesn't sit in exactly the same place as the ordinances that adopt the code. So it's not listed with all of the other international codes that you find in our municipal code. And then I wanted to include for you in the packet some of the modifications that were done when that 2015 code was adopted. So you could get somewhat of an understanding of what's involved in adopting the code. Some of them are pretty standard. You change things to the town of Lyons, so that wouldn't be too difficult. But what we're looking at is, again, getting some direction on should we look at going just to the 2018 suite and just go with that? Are we willing to say, no, let's try to take into some of the considerations that the fire department has with going to the 2020 International Fire Code? And in that case, we could potentially move forward with adoption of the other codes, looking to get any modifications that were needed to that. Or we could try to look at the 2021 full suite of codes. That has not really been looked at, but we could look at that. And the one item I know that's been out there was the fact that there's at least one municipality, Louisville, I think it was, that reverted back from the 2021 codes because of the costs involved. Granted, that was because of a major disaster and how many buildings would be happening at one time and the flooding of the building process to this new code. I also think there would be some concerns with the 2021, how quickly our building inspectors can be fully up to speed. I'm sure they can if they were told they needed to. Other municipalities are going that route. We were going with their recommendation of the 2018 because they have a complete understanding of that, and the 2021 being newer would require more review. That's my report for the building code.
Okay, can the record please reflect that Trustee Elson has joined us? Hello. And also to the person watching MBR Access, I want to let you know that our remote meeting policies indicate that people should use their real first and last names on Zoom. So much appreciated if you could change your name to your first and last name. Okay, who has questions for Director Kaplan?
Oh, good. We can all go home.
No, because I have a couple. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have a question?
I just wanted to give a little bit of history. I was a part of that 2015 code change. And I think one of the things that really came up that I had to really think about, we all did, was the concern for affordability. At the time, and I do think that we still have some of this as the case, it was, are we potentially creating building, becoming so expensive with new code that we would be hindering affordable housing, ADUs, et cetera. So we didn't want to necessarily create something that would hinder that potential growth for affordable housing, and then concern about the extra costs that it could cause a business. So while I'm in favor of making sure that we are always up with the times, I do think it's important to kind of sometimes weigh, and maybe there are some things that we should keep into consideration, especially after the Marshall Fire and Louisville ending up going backwards because of the affordability. And yet maybe that wasn't entirely the reason. It was just, I'm not exactly positive why they went back. So I guess I just wanted to bring that up, a little bit of historical context, but something to keep into consideration.
Thank you. Trustee Edding?
Yeah, so building codes have come up in the PCDC quite a bit. And I do believe a lot of the discussion was around how often do you want to move the goalposts? And so you have to be, I think there was a lot of thought that, well, you want to do this periodically, but you don't want to do it every other year, or else then you keep everybody guessing. But I would have two questions for Aaron. First of all, Summit is already pulled all their building permits, so any change in code most likely would not affect Summit in any way at this point. Is that true?
They've applied, and I believe once the application is submitted, building permits have not been issued. But I believe because they've applied and they're in process, just waiting for things, they wouldn't be affected.
Okay. I would just be curious about that because I don't want to change the goalposts on them. But I would imagine, though, if we do consider at least some upgrade, this would have then, I suppose, affect the hotel to some degree if there's anything relevant for the hotel. So those are just things to keep in mind. But the building codes are so complex. Has the PCDC reviewed this at all? Have they given us any input? Are we going to ask them to do that?
We can. They have not.
Okay. All right. I do recommend asking the PCDC for input on this. Okay, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, Mayor Rogan, I just want to refer back to the remote meeting policy. As I see, the individual has not changed their name. At this point, the chair has requested that the name be changed. And if it feels that the chair feels like this should happen at this point, the individual can be removed from the meeting platform by the host pursuant to Resolution 2021-57.
Thank you. Let's give this individual just a few more minutes. And if they do not change their name, I'll ask Clerk Vasquez to remove them and they can view the meeting on YouTube.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Dittman. Other questions, remarks for Director Kaplan? Okay, we'll get to my questions. So we're suggesting exempting townhouses and single and double family residences from sprinklers. Is that because of the cost that Mayor Pro Tem referred to?
Well, I don't know that we're recommending that. I don't know if you received my information I had emailed back to other staff. Sounds like maybe not. Oh.
No, I didn't.
Okay. So I tried to reply back. That is not recommended. That's what's currently in the code. That's actually the current code that's on there. So we would have to discuss whether or not we wanted to continue with that policy or not. It wasn't being recommended.
Okay. Okay. And is Summit required to have sprinklers?
They have it in the multifamily because multifamilies are required to. The single families, I do not believe have sprinklers.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And then I'm going to ask you that question about the fire code too, and I apologize because I received a mountain of email today and I may not have gotten to the one that was sent to me. But in the packet, it says that we're applying 2021 code to one incoming business and other codes to other businesses. And I'm curious about what the process is to determine what code is applied to which business. I'm just concerned that it could be seen as arbitrary or favoritism.
And that was a letter or the recommendations from the Lyons Fire Department. So
Okay.
that was them stating, not town staff on any of the building code. We're following the 2015 building codes now, all the regulations there. I believe the difference that they were discussing is one business that's expanding was already talking to them about what might be needed for the 2021. So they were trying to prepare ahead of time and be ready for the 2021 codes and get their building up to speed to meet that, rather than have to do that again, rather than bring their current building up to the 2018 and then their expanded new building facilities that they would do, they would have to bring everything up again. But that is from Fire Marshal Pischke in what you're referring to.
Okay. Okay. So that wasn't a town decision. That was a fire district decision.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Clerk Vasquez?
I just wanted to say something, and I don't remember it all the way. Victoria may have to help me, but you asked if Summit had already pulled their building permits. This came up with us at Bone Park. We had already pulled our permits, I believe, for the bathroom when we changed to the 2015 IBC code. And then we couldn't pass inspection because they were built to the old code and they were reviewing us under the new code. And we had to go in and get waivers for the wind load and the snow load. So it does make a difference. I don't remember it all the way, but I know that came up with some of our own buildings. So I just know we need to double check that. If they haven't been issued the permits and their drawings are to the codes we have in place now, that will become an issue.
Okay. Administrator Simonson?
I think tonight, just for clarification, is there an interest in pursuing the 18 or the 21 codes from a building perspective? As Director Kaplan has said, the fire code would love for us to go to 21. Our building inspector is saying that's a significant jump. So do we want to bring forward 18 or 21? There was already an overview in the packet about the differences. So that's kind of what we're looking for tonight, and then we'll have another chance. It'll come forward. I believe this will come as an ordinance, won't it? So there'll be public hearings and a couple readings on this.
Okay.
Yes, it would be an
Okay.
ordinance. And it was, the other option was 2015 and modifications. You could do a portion of it, 2018 and a portion of it to 2021 as another option.
And I'll add that most, if not all, of the Denver metro municipalities have moved to 2018 by now, and many are moving toward 2021 now. So we're a little bit behind the times here. So I'll ask everybody's opinion, but first I want to make sure that there are no more questions of Director Kaplan or Victoria. Okay. So Trustee Edding, what are your thoughts?
Certainly I do think we should look at going to 2018.
Okay.
Let's just make sure we don't do anything bad to Summit.
Great. Okay. Trustee Williams.
I'm in agreement on both of those issues and would add Moss Rock to it as well.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I think 2018 makes perfect sense. If there, though, is something very in particular, or precise from the fire department that's a 2021 that's really outstanding and important to them, I think it's worth considering something like that. But in general, I would say 2018.
Thank you. Trustee Gelman?
Is it too much of a jump to go to 2021?
Well, that's the question before us.
I guess I would just say incremental steps, so 2018.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Elson?
Yep, I would agree. So I'd love to go to 2021, but I think it'd be too expensive. But I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I think we should go with 2018 and see if the fire department has any specific things in the 2021 that could be added to it.
Great, I agree. I think leapfrogging would be a mistake. So there's the direction. Good with that? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask one more time if MBRXS would like to rename themselves, and if not, I'm going to ask Clerk Vasquez to remove them from the meeting. Clerk Vasquez, would you please remove them from the meeting? Thank you. As a matter of policy. So, all right, discussion direction on gun violence prevention strategies. So we had our workshop. I was thinking that the way to approach this discussion would be to first take a straw poll and ask how many people would like to pursue at least a gun violence prevention strategy. So we can raise our hands. Who would like to pursue this further? Okay, terrific. Next, I was thinking I would ask if there are trustees who would like to pursue every option that was presented to us. Are there trustees who would like to pursue every option that was presented to us? Okay. Okay, so it's not nothing and it's not everything is what I'm seeing here. So let's go around the screen and discuss which particular ordinances there's interest in pursuing. And I'll start with Trustee Edding.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Okay. After our discussion from the workshop, I have just 2 points that I'd like to make. One is, do we have any support? Did anything come up in the comp plan that we're halfway through in regards to any questions that were asked? Was there any public input on this? Did anybody raise any gun control measures in the comp plan? Maybe it's rhetorical, maybe nobody can answer that, but I think that's something important to consider. Number 2 is Town Administrator Simonson. You did mention something that's really important. If people are doing open carry in the municipal buildings and that it all makes the staff uncomfortable, I believe the municipal buildings would be considered special buildings, which is the term we used. I would fully and completely really prioritize how the staff feels as far as weapons inside or open carry inside the municipal buildings. I'd really like to hit that one hard because it's completely unacceptable for an employee to feel unsafe in their work environment. I'll stop here and let the other people go.
Yeah, and I'll say that one thing we heard from Sergeant Chris during our discussions was that it would be easier to enforce a town-wide open carry ban versus open carry in this area or that area. He said, and he gave the example, we could ban open carry in parks, and then someone could walk 2 feet outside the park. And so the borders are sort of permeable. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. So I'll ask Trustee Williams her thoughts, and then Mayor Pro Tem Farrell.
I'm in favor of pursuing an open carry ban throughout the entire town. Seems like it is the most enforceable, and that there are in fact holes already existing within the concealed carry law in the state of Colorado. So I would be in support of pursuing that as a single response to the issue at this point.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem and then Trustee Delman.
I'm in favor of the open carry, and I wouldn't want to pick and choose places. I would go ahead and just do the full town. But I am really interested in Attorney Dittman's recommendation about zoning. I think that sounds very appealing and worthwhile to explore. We can zone and say we don't want adult entertainment clubs within the town. And in fact, I think we have zoned those to not be included in the town of Lyons. So this to me would be something that I think is a similar type of restriction, I guess, for the lack of a better word. But so I would recommend that. And then I would also recommend that we perhaps, if we're unanimous or something close to that, that we write a strong statement that we can send to Boulder County as well as the state on our position overall, not necessarily just open carry.
Right. Attorney Dittman?
So maybe like a resolution of our principles on gun regulation, maybe, or gun violence prevention rather.
Mhm. Thank you. Trustee Delman?
So I agree with the open carry. I also would like to see raise the age to 21 and a ban on assault weapons.
Okay. Trustee Elson?
Okay, I agree with the open carry, the prohibiting the open carry, because it would be too hard to segregate spots where you couldn't carry and where you could. So I agree with that.
Okay. So it sounds like what we are, and I agree, and it sounds like what we are in agreement on is to direct staff to bring back an ordinance banning open carry. Is there anyone else who would like to pursue zoning options? So for example, restricting gun shops in commercial downtown. Trustee Williams?
I would be in favor of pursuing that as well. Not at the same time as pursuing open carry. I think we do it one step at a time, but I'd like to see that precisely as you said it, gun shops downtown.
Yeah, I'm curious why you think we should do them separately.
I think there's a little bit of instruction, I suppose, in Lafayette and what's happened there. And do we want to come on really strongly at this point, or do we just want to make a statement and watch what happens in that situation? I certainly would not like to see us embroiled in a lawsuit that takes up a lot of our time and attention. But I do believe it's really important to make a statement to our state legislature. And I believe at this point, doing them one at a time can move us in the direction of making sure we're influencing the state legislature, also making a statement about the town, but possibly not bringing quite as much attention that might draw a lawsuit. That's all.
Yeah, and it seems like the attention is sort of random. You know, like we heard Edgewater got a bunch of attention. But I spoke to Commissioner Lochamin about the issue because, you know, Boulder County, of course, took up the issue, and she said she was extremely surprised at the lack of vitriol that they saw. So,
and that was Superior, not Lafayette.
Yeah, well, and Superior enacted the entire library and then some. So personally, I feel like taking up zoning and taking up open carry at the same time makes a lot of sense. But of course, if the board disagrees, we're doing a step-by-step process.
I have no problem with that. Just a slight preference in the one direction.
Okay. So Trustee Edding, how do you feel about the zoning?
I'm not as focused on the zoning as much. So I think I'll just stay silent on that. But I do want to just mention at this point, and I agree with Trustee Williams, maybe doing this in steps might not be a bad idea, but I think we should also be encompassing this with other things. And I want to bring back up Trustee Dillman's request to review the police funding that we do in town, how many armed officers we have in town and what we're paying for. I think we should take a really balanced approach to gun violence and it not all just simply be about one thing. So I'll stop here. Thanks.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Trustee Edding, and we've been asking Sergeant Christ for that for a little bit now, and I know that he was sick and then he was out of town. So let's ask him again, Administrator Simonson, to bring us that data. So Trustee Delman, how do you feel about the zoning issue?
Zoning as in people can carry in certain locations and not others?
No, zoning as in amending our zoning code so that gun sellers are not allowed within a specific zoning district.
Oh, I agree with that.
Okay. Okay. So from my tallying here, it sounds like the majority of the board would like to direct staff to bring back an ordinance that addresses open carry. And it sounds like the majority would like to at least discuss zoning. Is that, Administrator Simonson, do you think I'm encapsulating that correctly?
Yes, I think there's actually, it's hard to do a count like that, but I think we should gear up something. You can decide on the timing for that as you'd like.
Okay. So let's do.
And then a legislative letter of standing or resolution, and then review police staffing.
Okay. Attorney Dittman, do you have anything to add?
No, I think the direction's clear from my perspective. So there may be some additional policy considerations, what to make, what zoning districts, you want restricted, that sort of thing. But at least we can have a start for discussion in a future meeting.
Okay. Okay. Everybody good with this? I know this is a big discussion. It's a big decision. And I commend us all for taking it on because it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. So yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Is there any direction or thought about how we would want to handle perhaps any negative emails that we might get or concerns that could arise?
Well, in my brief tenure as mayor, I've gotten a couple. And so my personal approach is if it is something that feels threatening, send it to Attorney Dittman and copy Administrator Simonson. And otherwise, my personal approach is if it contains cuss words, I just do not answer.
And people are free to, show up at our meetings and speak their piece, consistent with our policies.
Yep. Administrator Simonson?
There's also, I'll make a copy and send it to everybody. This month's Public Management magazine has, it has kind of a checklist for the media preparation and just talking points for elected officials on how you feel you're representing your community overall. So I'll send that out to all of you as well. Maybe that will give you some ideas. And then we'll work with Director Mitchell on some of the ways to inform people that this is going to be discussed, via an ordinance. And, again, you just hold the standard of professionalism and respect and work through it.
Yeah, and it is a community discussion. The only way to have this community discussion is to bring this forth, right? So, the community, who knows whether we'll be supported or not. We don't know until we hear from the community. And so regardless of what we wind up doing, it's a very important conversation to have. Okay. All right, well, then let's move on to trustee reports. I'll start with trustee Williams and then go to Mayor Pro Tem Farrell.
Historic Preservation Committee did meet last Wednesday and did not have a quorum. Did decide, however, we talked about CMAX and Brianna was going to, as chair, weigh in with the letter that can be put in the record for what we put together tomorrow night and later this week for the county. And that's it.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem and then trustee Delman.
Well, I would say from a PCDC standpoint, the biggest news is the comprehensive plan. And so we did get some feedback from Clarion, and in particular, some processes and getting more of an incorporation between town staff at this point, especially when we're really trying to nail down and get into the nitty-gritty details of our maps and our zones, et cetera. And they made some recommendations, and it sounds like there's going to be a little bit more happening starting on Monday, the 25th. I don't know if Administrator Simonson, if you want to add to that at all. But I think it's a step forward. I will say, though, I think there's a bit of a concern also in the participation level, but in particular from the Board of Trustees participation and members of the PCDC, some more active than others. And so, you know, trying to not sound critical, but constructive, if I may, really having genuine verbal input on what you're seeing in the comprehensive plan and where it is in its process is so important, and hearing it from all board members would be great. And we need to do this on the PCDC side too. Not everybody, I think, is really participating to the strength of the position that they're in. And so I'm just calling for everyone to please actively engage in providing continuous feedback as much as you can on where we are, because without that, it becomes a comprehensive plan of a few. And that's not what we want. And I think that would be a huge disappointment. So yeah, that's my small little lecture.
Thank you. Trustee Delman, then trustee Edding.
So with the PRC, they met and almost the entirety of the meeting was about CEMEX and their response and what will be done with that.
All right, terrific. Trustee Edding, then trustee Elson.
Yes, I've got three things to comment on. First of all, the UEB. Actually, can I defer any comments to that to Aaron? I was not able to attend the last meeting due to a work engagement. Director Kaplan, do you have anything from the UEB? Any update from that?
It was also just CEMEX, so it's in the report on CEMEX.
Okay. Okay. The second thing I have is the Student Advisory Council did not meet, but I did talk to Ms. Kaplan, and they elected to stay silent on CMEX. They just didn't feel that they knew enough or had been presented anything, so they decided to stay silent on that. The third thing is I am the one trustee in town taking the bus every day into Boulder. We will need more people because I can't be the only one on it. So far, I'm in the back of the bus talking to myself. But I would like to say the bus did not show up today. I did go down and I waited until about 8:10. It never showed up. So I do think we're going to need to check in with Boulder County to find out if there's just days that they can't make it. Because it will be problematic if they simply don't show, because then you're really, luckily I can just go home and get my car, but in Boulder that would be really bad. So I just asked the town staff to check up on that. I'm going to go ahead and try it again in the morning, and I'd love to see more people on the bus. The fourth thing is I didn't hear anything about the meeting in Breckenridge. If anybody wants to report on that, I was really sad I got to miss it, but I'd like to know, a little bit more directly about how that went in Breckenridge and what you guys learned. I'm done. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Trustee Edding. And I'm happy to talk about that. And I think I even have a written report somewhere that I can send you, but it was a great conference. Thankfully, everybody remained healthy, and happy to give you details about that. Learned a lot. Trustee Elson?
Yep, same thing. The EAC met last week. Discussion was all about CMEX and coming up with their statement for us. The SFC also met. I had a scheduling conflict, couldn't attend that, but there was the same discussion there. It was about CMEX for that.
Great. And for me, so the LAHC met and discussed CMEX and also the details for Art at Riverbend, which was amazing. I hope everybody got to go. And Mayor Pro Tem sold a painting. Yay. And so that was a terrific event, and also talked about upcoming events. We also discussed policy about where to place public art. So, there was that kerfuffle with the church and the pride flag on the sidewalk. And so I think we'll be seeing a new policy coming forward where they at least the LHC at least gets input from neighbors, so that we can have whole community involvement. And then I think this is in the administrator's report, but great news, we got grant funding to help reduce bare human interactions. And that's extremely exciting. So I got to go to an event with Governor Polis where he announced that. He first invited me to speak and then disinvited me, which is totally fine, but still got to say hello and make sure Lions was in the forefront there. So that's my report. Trustee Williams?
Yes, just received an email forwarded from Administrator Simonson that the chair of the HPC has had to resign, Rachel Nelson. Her father has been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and so she's going to be splitting her time between Kentucky and Colorado, and is stepping down. She is willing to remain in that position until someone is identified to take her place.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll definitely send a letter of thanks and support to Chair Nelson. She's been really terrific and was instrumental in getting our historic preservation ordinance passed. So, so we'll do that. Thank you. Okay, staff reports, utility update. It's you
I don't
again.
really have anything to add to what's in the report there. So if there are any questions on that.
I don't see any. Okay. Terrific. Finance update, Director Eystone.
Well, Erin, that's a tough act to follow. I'm not going to be as quick, but I won't take up too much time.
Thank you.
I'll share my screen and quickly give you the brief overview of how we're doing. So the financial update here is through June 30th of 2022. The sales tax, overall, we are still up over 2021. We are up about 7.95% from last year. However, you will see that the 2022 monthly amount was lower than last year. I did note that there was some refunds. Sometimes businesses amend their tax returns, and so the state has to refund them some money. So that was a significant amount, which I think contributed to that as well. But we did budget for sales tax to be 5.5% higher than 2021. And like I said, we're 7.95% higher. So definitely still in the positive, and that's great. Our local sales tax versus non-local was approximately 56 for the month versus 44. And you'll see that number increase as we get all the festivals and weddings and such under our belts. So that's always nice. And then our sales tax graph, you can kind of see how the month does dip a little bit lower as anticipated from the last couple slides. But again, as a whole, we're still up over 2021. So I'm not concerned there. Our year-to-date revenues versus expenditures through June, the revenues exceeded the expenditures in the general fund and the electric fund. The Parks and Rec fund expenses, were lower there as well due to vacancy savings and things like that. Delayed timings with maintenance and parks related activities. So that's typical. The year-to-date expenditures exceeded in the following funds: the water fund, and that's partially due to the Longs Peak project. And you'll hear me bring that up until we get that budget amended for the rollover from 2021 budget. So that was definitely anticipated and not unusual, as capital projects take multiple years to do. The sanitation fund, we had debt service payments that were made in April. So that always, increases your expenditures. And I should note, we have debt service in the water fund as well. So same thing with that. And then the stormwater fund also exceeded the revenue, but again, that's related to the Longs Peak project as well. So that was going to be anticipated. And we'll get all that budget amended for those capital rollovers later on this year. The year-to-date revenues versus what we had anticipated with the 3-month average budget through June, again, is still pretty great. We exceeded the budget projections in all the funds except for the Parks and Recreation Fund. And that's actually nothing to be concerned about. That's mostly due to a timing of the 3-year average and how it was done and, budgeted for in prior years and accounted for in prior years. So definitely nothing to be concerned of. And I anticipate once the full 12 months of taxes come in, that will be well above our budget projections, assuming that sales tax keeps coming in a little bit higher. But also our camping and parking revenues exceed the budget projections by about $30,000. So I anticipate we'll probably continue to see that as well. So no concerns there. The expenditures versus the budget, the 3-year annual average budget, were lower in all of the funds except for the water fund and the stormwater fund. But again, those are those Longs Peak projects that we just rolled over. So that was anticipated. There's definitely no surprises here. We do have lower expenses due to vacancy savings. And a lot of those are due to, some of the maintenance positions that we have since filled and also filled with some additional seasonal help. So that'll kind of eat into some of those vacancy savings. And then also some timing of capital projects and transfers that are associated with those capital projects. So as the year goes on, I anticipate the timing of the capital projects, will eat up some of those budgeted expenditures, assuming they all happen on time. And then the year-to-date attorney's fees, we made a little bit of change here. The attorney's fees was previously requested by prior board of trustees, but this time we broke it out to give a better illustration of what's typical being the operational costs, and then what is related to pending or ongoing lawsuits, things like Honeywell and things like that. So you can see of the $99,000 we've spent so far with Kissinger and Feldman, the majority or over half of that is due to those lawsuits. And in addition, we have paid an additional $20,500 to American Arbitration Association, and that's also related to Honeywell. And I believe, yes, that's all. So I'll stop sharing my screen and open it up for any questions.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, actually, I had a question on the attorneys. Fees. I would be curious to compare this year to last year. I just think that would be kind of an interesting number to hear.
Yeah, I'll do that next time, and I'll put that in the slide for next time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And if we could do the same thing and delineate the operational fees, that would be interesting to see too.
Absolutely.
Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, I just want to note on the American Arbitration Association fees, those are a deposit. They're not money that's gone forever necessarily. And so those will only be actually expended if, we go to arbitration. And it's kind of a budget amount. And so if we don't, that may come back to the town potentially. I just want to put that out on the record for you all to have a better understanding what that's for.
Thank you. Any other questions for Director Eystone? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Director Eystone.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Really appreciate it. You too. Okay, administrators report.
Well, I'll keep this short. My report was also in your packet, but we do want to know that, just so everyone is aware, that the Prickly Pear Tavern has closed and the Finer Diner Bar has had their soft opening, and they do have a temporary liquor license that was transferred to them while they go through a formal, more permanent process for that. Also, this past weekend, the Adventure Lodge was able to get their liquor license issued as well. So there's 2 new establishments on Main Street, and want to thank the clerks for working through those. It's not easy in this day and age with hardly anyone from the state working at their office to get those things through in a timely way, and they were able to help both of them accomplish that on their timelines, so that was good. I think you guys all know that we've been spending a lot of time on the CEMEX referral process, and that's been consuming quite a bit of time, as well as the beginning of a new plan year for staff benefits is July 1. So registering, open enrollment, all of those things just take time this month too, so a lot was sent on that. We do want to just make, this is, we have seen several new grant opportunities coming up recently, and so staff are going to have a brainstorming session and bring that back to the board in lieu of your priority discussion, that we want to become less grant dependent, but at the same time, these the Biden dollars are not going to be, they're a one-time shot. So we are going to meet and try to come back with you for a recommendation and a nod of which ones you want us to pursue or not, just so you know that you have a little more involvement in that and we're not overcommitting beyond what the board wants to. But almost all of them are one-time projects. They're not ongoing, issues that are going to create lots of maintenance. So we'll be bringing you back something on that to try to make sure we're going the direction the board wants. And then I don't want to, 2 more items, I guess. We've been noticing just very randomly that not everyone in town is applying their sales tax equally. It's like some people think, they're not sure if they're in Boulder County or Lyons or, so we, Kim went ahead and put together a brochure, and she and Director Eystone are sending out a message to businesses, just a friendly education message saying, your business is licensed in Lyons, therefore this is what you should be charging in each of these categories, to try to get that more consistent. So hopefully people will pick up on that as well as we send it to the chamber. But those few little 2.5 cents add up over time. So if you are out patronizing our businesses and you want to bring me a receipt, we'll double check them so that we can continue to help people get into compliance so they don't end up in a bad spot, like that is possible that they might not be applying it correctly. And then lastly, in regard to the comp plan, as follow-up to Mayor Pro Tem, we have had 3 inquiries in last month about annexation options. And so we will make sure that we're sharing that with Clarion. So as we are looking at what our growth area looks like, that they know there is interest from those property owners, because they may not currently be in our primary planning area, but might be within our 3-mile zone. So just kind of interesting, we're hearing more of that. We hadn't heard that for a long time, and it's kind of popped up recently. Other than that, as you'll see in the community relations report, we've had a couple requests from Stone Canyon for a speed study. We are going to look at our budget in that area to see if we think we can afford one. The numbers of vehicles that are passing through there seems to have increased dramatically. And there's a concern from some residents up there. I also, as we get ready to go into budgeting, which we are scheduled to have your audit for 2021 presented to you at our next meeting, then we will start focusing on the 2023 budget. So please know that we do have, there's an interest in reviving the Lions outdoor games. We'll want the board's input on that. And seems like there's something else there. Just want to remind folks too, Rocky Grass is coming up July 27th through August 1st. They will be leasing, Planet Bluegrass will be leasing the park. Sandstone Summer Concert Series, we only have 5 left, so means summer's starting to come to an end. And then last night, there was a really nice outdoor theater production in Bone Park. It was a small audience, excellent production, and hoping we can have the opportunity to offer that again to our residents, maybe when it's not quite so busy, you know, in town. So I'm quite so busy with people's, you know, vacation schedule. So any questions for me? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Legal update.
So really short one today because of the 4th of July holiday, not a lot of action in the litigation we've been in. The only thing that's happening is the discovery has started in the Honeywell litigation, but nothing really to report to the board. So I'm sure once the summer holidays start wrapping up, things will start heating up again. We'll have a report to give.
Great. Any questions for Attorney Dittman? All right. Can we please have a summary of action items?
Yes, we need the second reading of ordinance 1124 at the next meeting. Employee handbook resolution was continued to a date certain of 8/1. Spirit Hounds agenda item was also continued to a date certain of 8/1. Staff is to draft an ordinance banning open carry weapons townwide and discuss zoning. There's to draft a resolution in support of gun violence prevention. Also a request from the sheriff's office for the contract from data from Sergeant Christ. Follow up with Boca County on bus schedule status for no-shows. And the board would also like to see attorney's fees comparisons from 2021 to 2022 at the next report from Cassie, and also one comparing operating costs from 2021 to 2022.
The only other item I have is somehow communicating a CML update or CML conference update to the rest of the board.
Gotcha. Brandon, did I miss anything?
I think you got it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, is there a motion to move into executive session?
I move that we move into executive session.
Thank you. Thank you. Does Trustee Williams need to read the entire motion as printed on the agenda?
So Dolores, did you send out the script?
I believe I sent it to Holly. Or did I send it to you, Brandon, today?
You sent it to me and then I sent it back to you with edits and I don't know.
Okay.
Well,
No, that's different though from the just the motion.
The motion on the agenda is the title on the agenda is incorrect. We do need to identify why we're going to executive session, however, which was included in by sent Dolores. I can read it if you want and you can adopt my verbiage if that makes things easier.
Perfect.
But we do need to identify why we're going into executive session pursuant to the CRS. So the motion I would say is I move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS sections 24-6-402-4A for the purpose of discussion of sale of town-owned property at the former wastewater treatment plant facility site located at 2157 Apple Valley Road in North St. Vrain Drive, Mountains, Colorado 80540.
Okay, so that is the motion on the table. I believe Mayor Pro Tem seconded. We'll do a hand vote. All in favor of moving into executive session? Terrific. So Clerk Vasquez will send out the link and send me the
Yes.
language.
And
I
I'm
just
also,
sent you the language and the link will be next.
Okay.
and I'm also sending a confidential memo at the same time.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.